live before I say, "Hey, everyone," you know.
Oh, sure.
Um, so it should start
Once
up
I have
pretty
your
soon here.
chat over, I gotta make sure I mute your video.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are definitely live at this point. Definitely live at this point. All right, what's up, everybody? OJ here. Welcome back to another debate. It's been a while since we've had one of these, man. It's so good to have one. This is going to be friendly debate. It's not going to be all crazy. I'm not going to throw a ninja star in Nate's eye, or anything like that. Although I could. I mean, I could ninja. I could. That's a bubblegum ninja star. I could. That's tomorrow, by the way. Tomorrow is Ninja debate. I'm excited to get into that. But we do have a debate going down tonight. We have myself, and we also have, of course, my guest, Nintendo Prime, Nate from Nintendo Prime. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I can't complain. This quarantine sucks. But hey, it is what it is, At least I'm
Yes.
alive for now, so that's good, right? I think
Yeah.
it's good.
Yeah, it's good. I
I
think
think
it's good that I don't know anyone who's died yet, so I think that's a good sign.
that's also good. Yeah, I don't know anybody personally who's died, but I do know people that have been affected in terms of like their family or stuff like that. So hopefully this thing can kind of just like go away sometime soon. Apparently, like the heat kind of kills it a little bit, so maybe that will help. So
But that we can always hope.
yeah, we can always hope, but we'll see. We'll see. But it's been rough for some people, but we're here. We're here. We live, and we try to provide some entertainment for you guys. So we're gonna go ahead and get to that. So basically, the whole basis of this whole thing started really it started a while ago with this whole Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition when Nintendo first showed it off. I think the first thing is the name. First and foremost is the name. It's called Definitive Edition. That throws people off in terms of remaster, remake, port, whatever the case is. I think Steam kind of picked up a little bit too. Is when a popular YouTuber personality, Conrad, who's from Commonwealth, great YouTuber. I follow him. He put up a list in terms of Sony games and Nintendo games in terms of first half, and I actually didn't disagree with him. I thought the Sony games have been phenomenal. The only thing that that he added in was like, oh well, Xenoblade. I forgot to put Xenoblade, and he thought, well, that's just a port though. That's just a remaster. Like he kind of just like blew it off, But then he also mentioned Persona 5R, So that's kind of where this all got started, and I was like, oh well, I don't have a problem with what he's saying, but at the same time, like Xenoblade's it's not just a remaster. I just said no, it's more of a remake. And that's when Nate kind of jumped in and said, no, it's more of a remaster. And then there's a big old huge long thread
Oh my
on
God!
there.
People, I didn't have to say anything. People were just.
And then there's a big old huge long thread, and then more people chimed in. I know Stealth kind of chimed in, who's he's now a content creator. He's more of he was like a Twitter kind of personality, and then analyst. He kind of chimed in. We had other people chime in from various different sides. Kind of go back and forth. Which this thing has been going back and forth a little bit for a while now. I think it kind of things slowed down a little bit after the first screenshots, but then again now it just kind of like popped back up. People think, oh well, no, I don't care about these screenshots. It's still a remaster, or people are making up their own definitions of what they think it is, which is fine. But I wanted to bring Nate on because he's more. He said it's more. I think your quote was it's more of a remaster, not a remake. So let's just first start off. What do you consider? What is your definition of a remaster versus a remake? Or let's just say, what's your definition of a remake? How about that?
Oh well, it's hard to talk about one without the other, isn't it?
Okay.
Because the lines have kind of muddied over the years. It used to be pretty definitive because the terminology came from like movies and music, and how they use it, and then how it applied to video games. And it used to be extremely like definitive on what is what, and there's no debate. I mean, there's debate with marketing terms and how they have muddled things, but um, to me, like a full blown remake in a modern sense, because in past sense, a remake to me is basically just taking any game, throwing it in a new engine, looks pretty, you're good to go. You're just modernizing a game, which is kind of what a remaster does in a sense, but it doesn't usually back, at least when I was growing up, in a lesser sense. It was more so it's the same engine, it's the same this, it's the same that, just here's some new textures or here's some HD textures. As we know, 360, PS3, PlayStation 4, a lot of HD remasters. And that kind of became pretty simple. You have like your full blown, we're just rebuilding the game from the ground up, to the, well, we're just HDing what's already there. But I think what's kind of happened, and it's through no fault of really anyone other than just consumers, demanding more and more and more from what is a remake and what is a remaster. that it's gotten to the point now where my personal expectations, unfortunately, um, for some people, I suppose, and some people really do not like my opinion, um, is that a remake requires just a lot more than just what a remaster does. Because a remake, not only is it new engine, rebuilt from the ground up, all that jazz, it also has to take a lot of new liberties with the game. It has to kind of, it doesn't need to go as far as like a reimagining, which is what I consider what Final Fantasy VII was, more of a reimagining, which is a remake in a sense, but different. That's like a whole new spectrum of remakes. But it needs to just do a lot more. I think a good example, and I actually saw this in, I think, a GamerRanks video a while ago. He brought up a good example here for like Ratchet and Clank. That was a nice remake. It took the original game, completely rebuilt it with a brand new engine, ground up, new visuals, all that, and it has a lot of the same premise and all the same stuff. But there's so much new in it that it's almost like a new game, even for those that are revisiting it. And I think that's kind of like the big difference for me between a remake and a remaster is when you have a remaster, it's still basically the same game, same combat system, same everything. It just looks a lot prettier, even if it's in a new engine and it runs better and all that stuff. And I think that's kind of where things get muddied as well, because technically there's new content in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition as well. But I'm kind of setting that aside as more like, oh, they've just added some additional DLC after the fact. It's kind of what I'm treating that part as, because the main game is still... It's still going to be the same amazing game I played. Oh my God, how long ago was that now? That was a long time ago.
Well,
10 years.
8 years, I guess, if you want to talk about the US release. But
Oh,
I have
the
a
US
question
version,
on
yeah.
your idea of that, because you say that it has to completely redo everything in terms of how the game plays or how stuff like that. So what's the difference between, because Shadow of the Colossus, I want to get your take on that. Shadow of the Colossus is a remake. They market it as a remake. It is remade. So is it a remaster of a remaster? Even though it's greatly improved, the gameplay is pretty much the same. But that's a remake, and that's pretty much everyone had no problem with calling that a remake. But it's the same game. So how is that one a remake?
And this is where the marketing terms just really...
Well, no, it's not just marketing terms, though. This is what people were saying. But wait, hold up. This is what people were saying, though, Nate. You called it a remake, too. You never called it a remaster. You called it a remake. We all said it's a remake, right?
Well, it's because that's the terminology they use.
So are you going off of what they use, or are you going off of what you think? Which one?
I always go off of my own personal opinion on everything. Like, if they call it, as an example, if they call it Final Fantasy VII Remake, okay, I will call it a remake. If they call it a remaster, well, fine. I'll say it because it's the title of the game, or that's what they say. It doesn't mean that I believe that would be a remaster. In this case, with Shadow of the Colossus, when they... What is that, the third time they messed with the game?
It was...
I think it's the third.
It was the original PS2. It was remastered on the PS3. And then it was remade on the PS4.
Yeah. And, I only dabbled in the PS4 version a little bit, so I don't have a lot of experience with it to know if there was really a lot of significant differences. It felt pretty similar the first couple hours I played. Just looked better. And played, I guess, a little better. Maybe controlled a little better. I don't know.
Better. Controls are better. Yeah. There's a photo mode at the same time. Yeah. But everybody called that a remake, yet it was technically the same game that we played on PS3 and on PS2.
Yeah, and was that in the new engine too, I believe?
It wasn't a new engine. Bluepoint remade the game. It's a new engine. And which kind of brings me to my point with Xenoblade. That is in a brand new engine. It's in the Torn of the Golden Country engine. Now, here's what I think where some people are getting tripped up. It's interesting because you have like the Future Connected. That's not remastered from anything.
Yeah, that's all new content.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. So it's like, well, the base game is a remaster, but then Future Connected is a new game. Is it split? So that's where I kind of take it. It's just a remake with added new content. You have, in my opinion, significantly improved graphics. There's flat textures that are literally 3D in this one. The art style is completely...
It looks better than Xenoblade Chronicles 2, if I'm being honest.
Oh, yeah, well, because it's in the new engine. Because Torna looks better than 2, so it's in that new engine.
Yeah.
So they're not just taking... And I guess my definition would be... your definition, it leaves too much wiggle room. That's what I would think. My definition would be like... It would be based on a code level. Not what I think or what the developers are saying. Square Enix called Final Fantasy VIII a remaster. That is, they lost the source code. They remade the game. But yet they called it a remaster. They remade the game. Dragon Quest was remade for the Switch. They called it Definitive Edition. That's Nintendo's marketing there. Well, just call it the best version of the game. And
Yeah,
that's what they
Nintendo
did.
doesn't like to get into that debate too much.
Exactly. Nintendo doesn't call things remake, I mean, or anything like that. On top of that, I think if this game came out on the Wii U, there'd be zero discussion if this was a remake or a remaster. Everyone would have just called it a remake. And that's, I think, what the issue that I have here is that Final Fantasy VII, which is clearly clouding people's judgments, no pun intended.
Oh, that game.
Completely clouding
Unrealistic expectations now
Well,
on remakes.
I think that's where we're getting at here. And that's why I think maybe even your opinion might be a little bit clouded too from games like that. Because even if you look at a game like Panzer Dragoon, not drastically different from what they did. Now they added some stuff, they added some animations and things like that, but still the same core game. They called that Panzer Dragoon Remake. You know, they call that a remake. So I think that it comes down to a code level. Like, is the game, is it usually you take a game, you take the code, you port it over. Usually you port the engine over. You don't recreate it in a different engine. You just port whatever it has. You just port that over, you drop it in there, and then you up-res the game. Maybe you add some new things. But you in this one, it's not that. There's 3D models where there are 3D models. The art is completely obviously it's a completely different art style. It's completely different models. The models, like Shulk, is not the same model. It's a new model. If you look at the Bionis and the Mechonis at the beginning, they're completely way more added detail to the point to where if it was an actual remaster, it would look like it looks on Dolphin. It would look similar to that. It would be like, have you ever played the game on Dolphin? I don't know if you ever checked it. It would look like that, and it clearly doesn't look like a Dolphin type of game. And that's kind of how like Twilight Princess HD kind of looks Dolphin-ish. You know, there's some added stuff here and there, but it essentially looks pretty much like a Dolphin emulated game. So I think that's the biggest issue that I have here. People aren't giving it enough credit. They're just calling it a remaster and thinking that they just plopped it there when there's clearly new models, there's clearly new UI, there's clearly brand new content that wasn't remastered from anything. There's clearly new source code. Yes, there's probably reused animations. That's probably something that's reused, but new games reuse animations that are still considered new games. Doom Eternal reused animations. Smash Brothers reused animations. Lots of games reuse animations. But still new. Still gonna be a new game. So I think that's where my issue is.
Well, for me, it's a lot, and I just keep going back to I don't know. I guess that GamerX video where he mentioned in there, and it's just something I strongly agree with. I guess in the more modern sense, is that we're kind of getting away from things just being like HD remastered anymore. Like if they're gonna bring an old game back, they're almost always now starting to be put in new engine. And I have a problem with a lot of them, like even some of the stuff you brought up, they were slapped in the new engines and called a remake, even if it was a lot of the same game and it just felt the same. And I think that's where I'm trying to draw the strings between, just because you take something and put it in the new engine and build it from the ground up or whatever, claim built from the ground up, not the same as making a new game, of course, because I mean they did this in like a year or however long. Compared to how long they took to make, say, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 or something. It's a situation to me where it sucks because I'm starting to mingle reimagining and remaster together or remake together. But a remake to me, at least nowadays, and setting Final Fantasy VII aside, I haven't even played it, so it's easy for me to look at some videos and see, oh man, this is way different than what I played when I was younger. But I don't have any personal experience, and I do believe personal experience can play a role in it, because if you go and you play like the original Xenoblade Chronicles and then you play this game, and beyond some UI changes and all this stuff, I guess you would say quality of life improvements to the game and visuals, a lot of people are going to be like, hey, I've already played this game. It's exactly the same besides that new content edition. It's exactly the same. The combat's the same. The story's the same. The voice acting's the same. The music maybe's remastered a bit, but it's the same.
Music's remastered.
Yeah, but so like it leads to that situation to me where like you're just playing the same game. It just looks prettier, and that's what most people are going to get away from it. And in my mind, if that's pretty much the same game but prettier, that's a remaster. I don't care if they put it on a new engine, because it doesn't feel new. It just feels I'm just revisiting something I've
We're
already
not
played.
saying if it's a new game or not. We're saying if it's
But
remade
that's
or
part of
not. You
my
know,
definition for a
so
remake.
but that's not the
Like
actual definition of a remake. A remake
that's
is
it's
something
kind
that's
of
actually
like
a remake
trying
is
to think of
actually
a
something that's remade. You can make a game that's exactly the same, but if it's remade, it's remade. Shadow of the Colossus. I always go back to Shadow of
uh
the Colossus because that game seems to trick up these people that say, "Oh, well, it's the same," but it wasn't with that with Shadow of the Colossus. I did not hear anybody say that. They didn't say, "Oh, well, it's the same, so it's a remaster." Nobody called it that. But now with Xenoblade, all of a sudden, people want to call it a remaster. So I want you to, if you can answer for Shadow, stop brushing Shadow of the Colossus off to the side. That is a remake. Blue Point, that is a remake. Everyone said it was a remake in 2018,
but it's
and
a
it plays the
remaster to me.
same. But
It
it's
was a
not.
remaster to
It's not
me.
a remaster. The game was already remastered on
But
PS3.
but
The
again, this
PS3
is
version is a remaster.
okay. But again, it's the same game, looks prettier, plays the same. To me, you try to take one of my definitions of remake and just eliminate it. Oh, that is not a new game. But oftentimes when something's remade, that's exactly what it feels like. When you have a new artist that remakes an old song from like the 50s or 60s, it's the same song, same track, same lyrics, but it sounds completely different in a way because it's been remade in their own style. When you take a movie, guys, this happens in movies all the time. Movies are remade all the time. Old movies remade into new movies. It's still different. There's still some different storyline plots. There's some different, just the way it's shot, the way the cinematography is done. Just the script itself could even have some slight changes to it, even if it's the same base story because maybe it was based on a book back in the day or whatever. And like it almost feels like even though it's something familiar, something you've seen, something it's still different. It feels like something is a new experience. So I don't like eliminating the whole new game from the process because I think that's kind of what a remake to me feels like. It's like you're playing a new game that just feels familiar.
Let's take a look at some of these other games, like Spyro, for example. Same
Sure,
game.
Spyro
So that's
Reignited.
that's a remake, but you're saying it's a remaster. It's not a remake, even though everyone knows that it's a remake and everyone treated it as a remake. What about Crash Bandicoot? What about Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes? These games that were literally the same game, but they were remade.
They're all remasters to me.
But Nate, that's your revisionist history here. These were all remakes when they came out. Nobody called them remasters of anything. They all said, "Oh, it's remade. It's a remake." Everyone treated these games as remakes, and now all of a sudden, now they're remasters, not remakes. Here's the thing.
Well, here's the thing. Because
here's the thing. You're confusing what an actual remaster is. A remaster is when they take the source code, they plop it into something, and it literally looks the same but smoother. Here's an example of that. Ico or whatever, or Shadow of the Colossus. Another example, Devil May Cry, the new Devil May Cry. They took that game from the PS3, they put it on PS4, remastered it, runs in 60 frames per second, runs in 1080p. But it looks exactly the same as the PS3 and 360 version. We've seen this before. The BioShock games. Like
I just call those ports.
BioShock.
I just call them HD ports. I don't even call them remasters at that point.
They're remasters because they've increased the
quality. But I don't know. I didn't call it that. Other people might have called it that.
But you're factually not classifying things correctly now because that's what a remaster is.
Because I call a game that's ported that just has updated textures, not a remaster to me, because
that's what a remaster. That's the definition of a remaster. Like you said with movies and stuff. Like they enhance the quality. A port would just be something where it's just ported. There's no enhancement of quality. Whatever the case is, there's no enhancement. But if you want to talk about a remaster, they increase the quality. See, now you're like, but then if you look at exactly what a remaster and a remake is.
But if you look at what remasters and remakes of, as the movie examples are, there is not a single remade movie out there that you look at it and it's the same actors, the same cast, the same people, the same story, the same this, the same that. They're completely different. It feels like a whole new movie. I understand it's a little hard because when you remaster a movie, you literally are just like taking, say, a DVD quality, making it into Blu-ray quality or whatever. You're trying to take the original footage and get it out to people in a way that they haven't done it. Sometimes there's additional editing. We all know about the Star Wars, who shot first thing that got changed in the remastering of that film. But that's why I feel like what you're talking about is what I feel like the game industry was when I was growing up. Whenever you got a remaster, it was basically old game brought to new system, same code, same everything, better visuals, maybe a better frame rate. And that's kind of what we experienced in the PS3 360. I guess a little bit of the Wii U era as some of the
we
in some
experienced that
cases.
before, Nate. I think that you're really, I think at this point you're kind of reaching to make your point, because remakes have been a thing for a very long time. Remakes have been
Well,
around
sure, but when
for
I
a
was a
while,
kid,
and they
when
were
I was a
remade.
kid,
We're
was
not
I
talking about
thinking
kid.
of what a
Let's talk about
Well, that's
PS2.
why I brought up the era that I grew up in,
I grew
which
up in the same
yeah,
era
I
as
was a
you did,
kid for
and I
PS2. But I was a kid for PS2. I
we
didn't
were
one, I
teenagers,
didn't play
Nate.
PS2. I didn't play PS2.
Nate, we were
Let me just
teenagers.
start there. I was an N64 boy. I didn't
Nate,
play PS2.
Nate, we're the same age. We were teenagers when the PS2 and all that was out. We were teenagers growing to
Yeah,
be. We
that's a
were.
kid. I didn't look at things like okay. Here's a full confession. I didn't even care what a remaster or remake was until I was like 27. I just
Okay.
played games. I wasn't even aware if the game came out on prior system. I
And,
just played games.
and I understand that. I guess like the whole point would be like going from like remaster, right? Because whenever we saw a remaster from, let's just say, from the PS2 era to the 360 or to whatever the case was, it was pretty clear that it was a remaster. It was pretty clear the game looked the same, right? Like it just looked shiny. And then when games were remade, you can clearly tell it might be the same
It's kind
game.
of like Twilight Princess HD
Yeah,
situation.
they were
Yeah.
remade. So Twilight Princess HD is a perfect example because the game looks the same.
Yeah,
Xenoblade
it's the
Chronicles
same game, just higher resolution, basically.
literally does not. So it's remade, just like Twin Snakes, just like Spyro. The problem that I have is that all of these things that were literally remakes, nobody called Spyro, nobody called Crash Bandicoot. These games are recent. Nobody called them remasters because they were the same game. That narrative is being brought up here, and I really don't know why it's being brought up for this game only,
Well,
when
I
it wasn't
think
brought up for Crash and other games.
Well, I think the reason why the public, like me, I've always defined things a certain way. Things evolve. Like I kind of explained my definition. People don't have to agree. I really don't care. It's ultimately a pointless debate because, as you and I who kind of nodded and agreed on Twitter, like it doesn't really matter. Besides marketing, who cares? But fans seem to be really passionate on if it's a remake and if it's a remaster. I don't know if they associate quality to it for some reason, or if just because of what Final Fantasy VII has done now. It's like
Final
I think that's why the debate is happening. Is because of
Yeah,
what happened with Final Fantasy VII.
people don't remember things, like, and I think that like with this game in particular, it's because it's an RPG, it's because the animations are the same, but like I said before, we've had games that literally do the same thing and have been called remakes. The developer said, "Yo, we remade the game in a brand new engine. It's completely remade, or we use some stuff here and there. It looks like it moves similar, but we completely remade so many different things." And that's what Xenoblade is. Definitely using some animations that they had before, but the game is remade. There are so many aspects of the game that are remade, and Future Connected is completely new.
Well, yeah,
It's completely.
that's kind of the big bugaboo for me. Is like, well,
They,
hey, there is some new content. So
they,
what are you supposed to say to that? It's
they
like,
didn't port the game from anywhere, and that's where
yeah,
remaster comes from. It comes from actually taking source code and porting to another system. That's what it is. Like I said before, if this game was more of a remaster like you claimed it was, it would look like a Dolphin game, plain and simple. It would not have the art that it has. The art's completely different. The textures are completely different on the models. The
oh
models are
yeah,
completely different.
oh yeah.
It would
They've redone like a lot of the
so
game.
what I don't understand, it shouldn't really be more of a remaster then, because remasters, like I said, look the same. They don't redo things as much as this game has redone things. I think that this definition where you have to completely change the way the game plays in order for it to be a remake, I think that's nonsense, because
Well, you
nobody
don't have to
did. I think
necessarily.
it's a little bit of nonsense because that's not the case with so many other games. Not all of a sudden it's the case here, because I didn't hear you call Spyro and those games remasters. I'm pretty sure everyone called them remakes. We're remaking the games. Everyone called it
I
that,
know.
and now with this one, all of a sudden it's remaster. Shadow of the Colossus, everybody called it remake. Now all of a sudden it's a remaster. That's ridiculous. The game was two versions of a remaster. It's not the same thing. If we did that, then Devil May Cry, like that game's been remastered how many times? Like the collection, they did it on PS3, the collection, then they did it on PS4. I mean, it's not the same thing as what Sony did with Shadow of the
I'll give you an
Colossus.
example because I mean, you mentioned. I know you don't necessarily mean me specifically. You're just talking in general in
Mhm.
terms of people didn't say that Spyro Reignited was SP. Well, I didn't say anything because I wasn't having the. I just made my video. It's coming to Switch, cool, and called it a day. But when one thing I did have a debate back, like way back in the day, and this just lets me know my mindset's been this way for a while. I thought that Ocarina of Time 3D, when that came to the 3DS, and that was completely redone in a whole new engine that Grezzo made.
Mhm.
but it was the exact same game with hardly any. I was actually really disappointed. There was like no changes, because whole nother debate for another time on that game. But I called it a remaster. So I'm like, it's just the same game. It just looks better, even though it's in a new engine, even though there's gyro aiming now. It's the same game. And by what you're saying, that would be considered a remake, and people maybe considered it a remake back then. I don't know, but I didn't. It's a whole new engine, all new assets they had to rebuild.
Definitely, I think they used they ported the game in the 3DS. They had a lot of game code, that games like Star Fox, right? Star Fox, Majora's Mask, these games that I think they would just port the game code then build on top of it, which could be kind of like one of those in between.
Yeah, and that's something I don't remember exactly.
Deals.
Yeah, they talked back in interviews that it was a new engine, but I honestly, I didn't break down the code to really see.
They ported that. I mean, and that's what could have happened here with Xenoblade. I mean, it could be they could take the code, and that's why the animations look the same. But there's too much stuff that's rebuilt. That's
what we also consider is like, what does a new engine even mean, right? Like when we think, oh, games have brought to a new engine, the automatic assumption is, okay, so they started with nothing, with literally nothing, and just started raw coding the game, and they just had an example to build off of and went off of that. Whereas what I know is someone who I actually have done some programming, and I'm in school for programming right now. Even when we move things to a new engine or a new platform, we just copy paste all the code in, and what doesn't run, we go in and error correct and fix, and then whoop, it's running in a new engine with different assets and different lines of code that we've learned from other things we've done. In this case, like when they put it in the, I guess is this the second modification of the engine? I know it started on Xenoblade Chronicles X, and then they used it in 2, and then modified it for Torna.
Yeah, they rebuilt quite a number of things for the Torna the Golden Country engine.
Terms of stuff. That's why Torna looks so much better.
Yeah, it's been modified, over the years in terms of what they've done. But I think that, like I said before, I don't think a remake means you go from absolutely nothing, and there's nothing that you have, and then you completely remake everything to the point where I just don't think that's
like
exactly
I think about it like so. that's what a remake is. Like if I set this up, like let's say I have a 3D printer, right, and I have this bottle, and I want to remake this bottle. I start from nothing and build a new one in a 3D printer, and that's suddenly the bottle, and it might look exactly the same. But it technically,
but we did that with Shadow of the Colossus, and you said that's a remaster.
But they didn't start with nothing.
They did.
What I'm saying, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. As someone who programs, they did not start with nothing. They took that code, they threw it at the new engine, and then built on top of it to make it look the way they did. And you're saying no, but have you ever gone into the game code and actually compared line by line the game code to see, it's different?
Blue Point said that the game was remade. Blue Point said that the game was remade.
Sure. That's because, again, marketing, it's all marketing, because something being remade, something being a remake, maybe we can agree on this point. Something being called or being remade or being called a remake is often considered a higher quality product, right?
A remake?
Yes, a remake. Like a remake, people consider it's like Final Fantasy VII really bad comparison, because that's so far out this whatever. But you know what I mean, like that game, and then you have like Twilight Princess HD. People are going to consider, the Final Fantasy VII one, that's a remake. The other one's a remaster. Remakes are just a higher quality product because it's in general more effort or whatever the case might be. But that's the thing. When you are a developer and you want to hype your game up, why would you call it less than what you want it to be called, so you get the more hype build for it? That's the problem that I have with this. My biggest problem with the whole terminology is how market developers use it, because if you just copy pasted code into a new engine, modified it to run on that engine, but you're calling it a remake, you're like, no, there's not a single programmer in the world that starts.
I don't think, first of all, we can't prove that they copy pasted it. On top of that, copy pasting code is not, it's not something that you could just do on engines and all of a sudden everything just works perfectly. If you're
that's what I'm saying though. You have an import, is what it's called. You have an importer that's built for the engine that ports in the code, and then it'll try running that code, and usually it's really choppy, or there'll be bugs and all this stuff, and then you just go through and you literally are just patching code that already exists, because nobody, when they're remaking a game that runs exactly the same, like Final Fantasy VII is different. That was obviously completely ground up. Everyone knows that. Like, it doesn't even run the same way the other game. It's not even the same perspective. It's all different. But that's, again, the complete, far end of the spectrum that I don't actually expect most remakes to go for. That's more of a reimagining, taking a game and just completely making it something different with the same story. And I think when it comes to the remake, what they need to do, at least what in my opinion, is what's happening with a lot of, I guess, the remasters in particular, is when they're putting them in these new engines. And this is just something I know from coding, is we use an importer and we port the code and then we patch the code and voila, we're running on a new engine.
I personally don't think, based off of who I've spoke with, especially with this, that you can just sit there, import code, and everything works just fine.
No, that's what I just said. You import the code and then you patch it. So it doesn't work right away, but they're not. When you have a game like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that runs and the animations are the same, the combat's the same, like everything's pretty much the same beyond some menus, and obviously some quality of life, but everything. I mean, what's different about the combat?
The models aren't. We're not talking.
You could swap out a model and use the same code, but the code base doesn't change if the model changes.
Dude, but
that's 3D artists.
We're talking about 3D artists. It's not code. But look, we're talking about being remade. We're talking about the game being remade. Right?
Sure, but if you could use the same code base and still put that model.
But modeling has nothing to do with code. The problem that I have is that you're just assuming, oh, well, you could just take the same code and then it's just there. So this is why I'm calling it a remaster, because
when you watch it and the animations are exactly the same, that lets me know they are reusing, but they're reusing code. The animations are completed with code.
That doesn't make it a remaster. Just like Smash Brothers uses animation.
You said your own definition said because the code is different, and it's like, yes, there's factually going to be some differences in the code.
This is not the same code plopped into there because you think animations are the same when they literally facial animations have changed and things have. It's not one-to-one with every single thing in the game. You think it is, but it's not. If you actually watch, there are multiple things that have changed.
This is so hard to talk to someone who doesn't code, who doesn't know how code works, because they took the code, they slapped it in the engine, and they added things to it. Oh my gosh!
No, they didn't. You don't know if they did that. That's the problem that I have. First of all, when you don't know that they did that, and second of all, there's already things that they've changed quite a bit. It's not the same just code that you're trying to claim. That
yes, because there's the engine could do new things, so they patch those things into the code.
You don't know what the engine.
But you don't either. But I've worked on video games. Do you want to? I've literally coded video games and ported them into different.
You haven't worked on anything like Xenoblade. And not only that, you're calling Shadow of the Colossus a remaster.
Yes, I am calling it a remaster. I guarantee you over half the code is reused. I guarantee you over half the code's reused. When people are making a game that plays exactly the same as a prior game and just looks a lot better with a better frame rate and all this stuff, what happens is they're reusing code because programmers are going to use the code that's already there. Why would they remake code they already have that does what they need to do? They don't necessarily have to change.
Yes, they do, Nate.
No, that's part of optimization when you're optimizing an engine.
Code the same. I know you want to think that, so you can try to say this right here, but they don't.
No, I'm just
telling the code's the same because you see some animations there. Okay.
No, I'm saying they ported the code into the engine and then edited and added to the code on top of the code that already existed for the game. They made changes to that code to make it better.
Remasters,
with the current engine.
Real remasters don't change that type of stuff. Devil May Cry, that's been ported. Looking at games like the PS3 version of Shadow of the Colossus, they don't make those changes, Nate. They just take the code, they plop it in there, and they upscale it. Sometimes it runs in better, but they don't.
That's not entirely true. I have one counter argument to it. It's not entirely true. I'm saying it's not entirely true because they run at a better frame rate, and that's not possible without messing with it. That's not possible. If you just take the same engine, the same code, and slap it on better hardware, it doesn't necessarily run better when you're programming. That's not how it works. You have to optimize some
adjustments and everything, but this is clearly different with Xenoblade compared to Shadow of the Colossus on PS3. It clearly is different.
Would you think this? This is a weird thing because I wonder how much of this you're basing on the visuals. If they didn't replace the model and they just gave us the same models but in HD, would you be saying the same thing?
Well, there's different animations in terms of what they've.
But even with the new animations, if they use the same old models from the original game but just in HD, no, they dolphined it with some new
That's
animations added in.
if they
Would you
dolphined it
consider
with
that a
some
remake?
if they dolphined it with some new
But it's
animations,
just what it would feel like
it
playing
would
it,
it
not
would depend
knowing
it,
the
it would
history of
depend
it.
on what they changed. It would depend on what they changed and what they did. I mean, you can have the game that's remade and it looks the same, but maybe they remake a bunch of different things with the game. You know what I'm saying? So that's that. They could have just done that, but they didn't. What they did with this game is that they actually have remake, like they remake stuff in the game. The game is being remade to a number of different things. You know, maybe they wanted to
Yeah,
keep the gameplay the
it's
same
just
because the
a
gameplay's good, and maybe they didn't want to change the flow of gameplay that they had. So they remade everything that they needed to remake in order to update it. The game was already ahead of its time when it came out. It doesn't really need a bunch of different things to remake with the animations and all that type of stuff. It's already a huge, massive game, and if you look at the environments and if you look at the models and you look at everything, everything's already really, it looks really good. So to me, in my opinion, if you take that much time to remake the models and completely redo the art, that's definitely more on the remake territory. And then of course you put it on the new engine, you do a bunch of different things. Obviously you've got to change the code up. It's not just the same code
well,
plopped in
yeah,
there, but
there are changes.
with a little bit of
There are
optimization here and
changes,
there,
yes.
like they did with like they did with DMC. DMC is a game that they did not take a lot of time to change a bunch of stuff. It looks exactly the same. It runs in better frame rate. We know about that type of stuff. They could have done that if they wanted to, and it would have looked like a Dolphin
So
game running in 60 frames per second,
I have
1080p.
a.
You know,
Do you know? I don't know, and I know you've been following the game more closely than I. Do you know when they started development on the definitive?
based off of recruiting, they probably started about 2 years ago,
About 2 years ago.
two
So
or
like
so
right
years
when
ago.
they kind of, pretty much right when they wrapped up Xenoblade, pretty much at
Yeah,
that
pretty
point.
much when they wrapped up Xenoblade. Not everybody was working on Xenoblade
Well, they
Chronicles
have a
2.
bigger team that helps Zelda for some
Yeah,
reason, and they actually have
well,
making.
they have five different teams, and
Yeah.
about three of them are auxiliary teams helping out with Animal Crossing, Zelda, various different things. Then you have the main team, Takahashi, who's doing that. Then they have like another team that's like an art asset team and all that that helps out with a bunch of
Mhm,
art and all that. The main team
mhm.
is working on this game. The main team necessarily didn't all work on Xenoblade Chronicles 2. That had about maybe 40 to 50 people with some outside contracted help while they were putting the first initial phases and plans for Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. What we know about ports or remasters from the Switch is that it can take anywhere from 9 months to a year or so from a lot of these games. Skyrim took about that time. Diablo took about that time. They've been working on this one a bit longer than what you'd see for a normal remaster
Well, it also
or
depends
port.
on. That probably also depends on how big the team is because they were also still doing the DLC for Xenoblade during that. So
Yeah, but they did that with with that same base team in terms of Torna. They did that. Torna's a much smaller game. Have you played it, Torna?
yeah, I
Okay.
played it a little bit
Yeah,
of it.
it's a much smaller game. I mean, and they all planned that there. That team was working on that, but they already had a whole other team that was working on something else, which I think they're working on a couple projects. They have their new IP that they're working on.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're
They
working
announced a
on
while ago, yeah.
yeah, and they're working on this game. So I'm looking at it this way, like
And
I
I
think
bet
that
you there's a new Xenoblade somewhere
probably
cooking in there.
probably I think the biggest thing that I think it would be nice, I guess, is if we can say, hey, remasters are remasters. It's pretty clear to see what a remaster is to me. You look at Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3, that's a remaster. You look at Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4, that's a remake. Because they could have made it look just like the PS3 version of the game. If they really wanted to, they could have just done that. You look at Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD. That's a remaster. The game was
Sure.
that's a remaster. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with that.
You look at Link's Awakening. That's a remake. That's clearly a remake of the game. Operates kind of the same as the original. Kind of has the same gameplay as the original. They've added some things or not. It's not drastically different in terms of things. In terms of gameplay, kind of similar. But is that a remaster because the gameplay is similar?
I called it a remaster when it was announced, so.
But it's clearly not a remaster.
But
See what I'm saying? But it's clear.
yeah, but it all comes down to just a difference of definition of what we consider to be remasters and remakes. And I get that there's like literal definitions that exist out there. And the reason why I just stopped using them is because once I started seeing some developers call things remakes and remasters that went against what the literal definitions were, I was like, well, you know what? Then the definitions don't matter in the gaming industry because those definitions were made before video games were really diving deep into it, because remastering things and remaking things have been going on all over the world in a bunch of different mediums. So I don't know that those definitions apply. I guess a lot of it's just mind share. Like, when I look at all the guys watching on both the channels here, I've seen a lot of really good discussion happening. Some people just calling us both idiots because that's just the way it goes. But it that's the internet for you. But I think a lot of it just comes down to, I see people on both sides of the fence debating even harder than we are, because people just have different definitions in their mind of what they consider to be a remake versus a remaster. Like, to me, a remake is you're making it from the ground up, and if you're not making it from the ground up and it doesn't have a bunch of differences in it to make it feel like a new game, then all you're doing is just taking the game that's already there and improving it. Remaster. That's literally my definition of remaster. Taking the game that's already there and improving it. Cool.
So
that's a remaster.
But so somebody could generally take a game, by your definition, completely remake it in terms of models and everything, make it anime and just the same, and it's not a remake of the game, even though they drastically improve everything, sound, gameplay, whatever the case is, but it's a remaster.
If it plays exactly the same and it uses the same code, it's just a remake that had different art assets thrown on, or a remaster. That had different.
Here's the thing with
this
code thing, though. But we can never know how much code is being used. What's the percentage that a game uses? How much code than we know before it's a remake or a remaster? Your definition.
You can find it out, but it takes a lot of.
It takes a while. Your definition is really dicey. It's hard to market that to people, and so now all of a sudden,
that's why they don't use it when they market. They just label it whatever they think sell more copies.
Going by your definition,
or if you're Nintendo, you just avoid it altogether.
I know, but going on your definition, it really it's a kind of a slap in the face to the Xenoblade developers, because they're like, they're remaking so many different things, and then you're putting it in the basket with.
But is it a slap in the face? Does it affect the quality of the game? The game's still going to be great. It was already a great game. It's still going to be great.
It does the same stuff that like Conrad did. Like, oh well, it's just a remaster, so I'm not going to count it there. You know what I'm saying? When it's clearly, obviously, it's more than that.
I think that's a mindset with people, where they write things off because of how they want to label it, and that's what I think the fan debate happens between remake and remaster. Remake holds more weight than a remaster does in terms of, I guess, selling power and buying power and people's hype. They get more hype for a remake than they do a remaster, and it's like the definitive edition term. It doesn't really mean anything. Nintendo's use that literally just ports from the Wii U, so like, it's not, Nintendo tries to avoid the debate altogether, which is probably good on Nintendo, because fans care way more about this than I think they should. I don't know that we've ever seen like stats that show sales are actually affected by how it's marketed, remaster or remake, and what fans consider it. It's usually just based on, is it a popular game that people want to play again? That's usually what determines if people are going to buy it. Final Fantasy VII is widely considered one of the greatest games of all time. No matter how they remastered or remade it or whatever, people were going to buy it. Yeah. And that same thing, like with Xenoblade, the benefit that Xenoblade Chronicles gets now is not only does it look better than the last time maybe people experienced Xenoblade for the first time with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Xenoblade is more popular now than it was back then. So you actually have a whole new audience that can get to experience the original and actually maybe be really impressed and like it better than 2, because they've learned a lot with that engine and with everything they're doing to make things look and feel better. Plus, people already thought the original was better than 2 anyways, but that's obviously personal opinions and what you prefer.
I think, like I said, with this one here, people are kind of like in between. I mean, and I think to me, it kind of leans more on the side of a remake, because, like I've said, I've seen so many remastered games, and those are usually, let's just be honest, they're lazier. They're quite lazy. When something's flat,
I just call them. Yeah, that's why. Like a lot of the really lazy ones, I don't even remasters. They're literally HD ports. They're Dolphin port.
Well, that's a remaster, because like if you're like I said, if you're improving the quality, it's a.
Think about it on Dolphin though. Sometimes you don't even have to download assets. The assets are already in HD. They're just not presented to you because the system wasn't in HD.
The level of quality, that's subjective in terms of what you call it before it's a remaster or not. But any improvement in quality is called a remaster. If you improve the quality and aspects,
I know that's the traditional term of remaster.
Traditional term of
improved
remaster.
Quality.
And that's kind of like. That's why I don't like these custom terms, because then people start creating their own rules to
welcome to the video game industry.
Like, this game, it plays exactly the same, so I'm going to call it a remaster, despite the developers taking a long time, way longer than any developer that would make a remaster, right? Way longer than that. I can guarantee you Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4 took a lot longer to develop than Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3. guarantee you they took way more time crafting that one in terms of what they
No
did.
idea.
So the fact that it's being lumped into that and saying, oh well, since it plays the same, therefore it's just like that. That's just, I think that's wrong. It's just wrong. We shouldn't have to go through that, especially when remakes and remasters aren't a new concept. All of a sudden, this gets brought up, and now people want to bring this up. But like I said,
it's expectations. People's expectations have changed. Just simply porting something to put in HD isn't good enough for a lot of people.
I don't know if people's expectations have changed because most people.
Because now we're going on to what are we on? We're coming up on our third generation of HD systems. Like people just things being in HD or being moved from 1080p to 4K isn't going to be enough for a lot of people. They expect more when these games are brought.
And expectations are one thing, but definition, facts, and like what's been going on is another thing. So just because you expect something doesn't mean you can change the definition of something. But I think that's the problem that I have. It's like, oh well, my expectations are this, so therefore this is the new definition. Despite there being decades of history of this happening and things being one way, all of a sudden I want to think this way because my opinion is I expect more. So my
a lot of the history, a lot of the history was just taking games that weren't in HD and putting them in HD. Now we're in an era. Okay, now you're taking HD because every game you brought up, game that wasn't in HD, put in the HD.
Metal Gear Solid was not. Metal Gear Solid was a remake. Yeah, Super Mario All Stars. I mean, there's so many games that were remade in ways and things changed and graphical.
What does Super Mario All Stars, a collection pack, have to do with anything?
Well, they upgraded the graphics in that game.
It's still a remaster.
I know, but I'm saying that remasters and remakes have been happening.
Okay, I thought for a second you were calling that a remake.
No, remasters and remakes have been happening for a long time. This is even like the GameCube. The GameCube got a remake of Resident Evil. It got a remake of Resident Evil. It was a completely new graphics, completely new stuff. Played like the original, kinda. You know, had the same layout and everything.
Yeah, I can't comment because I actually didn't play the original.
Okay, so well, you should check it out. You should check out.
I should check it out. Yeah, I played a lot of.
Then check out the remake. Layout's the same. A lot of stuff the same. They changed some things around, but remakes have been around for a while. Now all of a sudden we get into this Zoomer age, and people want to sit there and say,
"Oh boy."
People want to sit there and say, "Oh well, since it doesn't do this, then this."
I hate those Zoomer, Boomer.
We get into this
whatever age
where people want to sit there and make up their own definitions based on what they think, despite things have been going on for a while now, Nate. You know, like remakes have been happening for a long time. Metal Gear Solid added a like first-person mode, but the gameplay was pretty much it was the same. They added some new modes and some new stuff that you can do, but the gameplay and the game was the same.
So. Have definitions of word changed over time as things have changed? Just in general.
I think that there's some people that are being influenced by how developers do stuff new, not at this point, but that it doesn't erase what an original definition is. It doesn't erase.
Because if you go through the dictionary, you're going to find a ton of words that here's the original definition. People stop using them that way, and now they use it in a different way, and now that's considered the official definition of the word. The reason I bring it up is because the definition of term in the gaming industry is really bad about this, and maybe it's just what you say, the Zoomer age. I don't know. I don't pay attention to that garbage. I don't even know what age I'm considered.
You're
Gen Z? Millennial, yeah. I don't know. I'm fine with that because Backstreet Boys are my jam, and they have a Millennium album. I'll take that.
All right.
Anyways, yeah. I know. Not necessarily the least embarrassing. Actually, I could say something way more embarrassing than that. But
you don't have to.
Gotta save it. Anyways, but yeah, like I think it's just the sign of the times is. You know, things when I was a kid, the way that people talked and the way words were used are different than they're used now. And when I'm 80, the way people talk and use words then and terminology is going to be different than what it is now or what it was even, 20 years prior to that. And I think what's happening, and I don't even think this is an exclusive thing to this age group. I think it's just that there's the age group before them, and then there's this one. And then they're taking the terms and they're forming them into what they feel it should mean. Hence the increased expectations on what a remaster is. And I just kind of fall into that later category.
You mean a remake? Expectations of what a remake is?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. Like what a remake is, because obviously, I agree with you in hindsight looking back. You can say, well, that's a remake, that's a remaster, etc. But like, I wasn't looking at games that way back then. And the first time I ever did was Ocarina of Time 3D. And even then, that was the only game I really even looked at that way. Like, I didn't even think about the Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD, what those were. It wasn't even something that crossed my mind because I just didn't care. It wasn't really until I got into YouTube that I started realizing that people really care about this crap that means nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
but I think that I think the biggest problem is that people
and
use it.
so my definition just comes from what I've realized everyone around me seems to be using, except for you and obviously the people that came from our age or whatever. And I think that's just a difference in age groups because whatever they think, the age group after the Zoomers is going to think something completely different about that tournament.
I think that's why I think that's why I'm having this discussion because we look at it like I'm not down for revisionist history because the problem is that if you want to acknowledge how it was, then acknowledge. But a lot of these people aren't even acknowledging how it was. They're just sitting here. We're gonna start with here, and this is what we're going to expect because I played this, and this game. That is the worst attitude to have. Is like since this game did this, I'm going to change my definition because we expect more. That's expecting more in terms of is the game quality or not. That should not change the.
They
That should
expect
not,
more from the remake. They expect more from
the
what a
game could be
remaster or a
lower.
remake.
The game could be lower quality than the original game, and you're propping it as something that's better. Yet it could be lower quality, or it could be worse if you sit there and
Well,
completely change the game.
There's like people who legit think that not a lot, but I've seen some people that legit love the original Final Fantasy VII that don't like the combat system, the action
Well,
RPG combat system, so it just ruins the whole remake for them.
yeah,
And but I don't think that they're not sitting there saying, "Oh, because I don't like it, it's not a remake." They still consider it a remake because the reason they don't
well,
like it
they
is because it feels
they
like a new game.
they consider it a remake because a lot of people are look at titles and they say this. I guarantee you, if this was called Xenoblade Chronicles Remake, people would just be like, well, it's a remake. Like, people aren't looking at it like, well, if the code is changed in this certain aspect.
Again, but
I think
goes back to the marketing term.
it's definitely that. People with this discussion, if this was on Wii U and it was called a remake, we wouldn't be having this discussion. If this was on Switch and they just called it Xenoblade Chronicles Remake, people wouldn't be like,
I wouldn't have been having the discussion on Wii U.
am I questioning this because people didn't do this with Shadow of the Colossus when they flat out said it. People didn't do this with Spyro. People didn't do this with Crash. People didn't do this with any of these games here. And those have similar animations.
Again,
those have similar stuff, So
I think a lot of it is the Final Fantasy VII effect.
And maybe Resident Evil.
Maybe Resident Evil. Yeah, the remakes. Yeah, like those look like. I think what's happened is that lately, full blown remakes are just going above and beyond anything that we've ever thought a remake. And I think ultimately that's what's making people change their opinions on what's a remake versus what's a lazy port versus what's a remaster. And I don't even consider ports and remasters the same thing. People could disagree with me. I really don't care. Because any like literally we see people messing around that are just amateurs at their house that spend a week and can make things look sometimes better than what an HD port looked like. So like I know there's like no effort put into it, and I think there's got to be some effort put into remastering something because if it's just like I took an AVI file and like put it into a different format and it just happens to sound a little bit better when I did that. I didn't put any effort into that. That was just a rendering process. So I think that it's just a difference in age groups. It's a difference in the way people are using terminology today, just in general. I mean, the words that are used today just don't mean what they meant when I was a kid. And I don't really have anything. Like, I came into this debate, and I literally told your fans and my fans about to get my butt handed to me because I know your argument. I know what it is because it's an easy one to make because that's our history. That's what we grew up with. And when I thought back and after we agreed in the debate, I'm like, well, yeah, this is what a remaster used to be. This is what a remake, it used to be. And why should we change the terminology? And I think it's just because we grew up that way, so that's the way we expect things to be. But if you don't grow up that way, you don't expect that anymore. And what's happening is the new gamers are starting to grow up where, dude, Resident Evil 2, that's what they expect now out of a remake. Well, they expect a remaster to be what Xenoblade is or some other games
I think that's maybe half right, half wrong. we're looking at guys like, there's guys that are older, that are our age or older, that grew up, and it's not just necessarily new people. When I said
Yeah.
Zoomer, I was just joking around.
Yeah,
There's,
yeah, I know.
there's people that are our age or older that are also or people that are, users that have lived through that. And now they're trying to say this is like, if you completely reboot something or completely reimagine something, that kind of has its own thing in its own right. And with Xenoblade, it's definitely being, like I said, it's more remade a lot of different things. It's not the same as a
Yeah.
remaster. So I think I'm looking at, like, if you look at Final Fantasy VII, for example, that's a complete reimagining, and which some people have noted in the chat. But this is something that is complete reimagining. I mean, what are you remaking? You're taking some of the characters and all that stuff like that, but you're remaking some of the scenes, you're remaking some of the stuff, but there's so many new things that are added in. That's completely reimagined, completely different from what a remake of a game. If the developer wants to make a faithful remake of something, should they be relegated now down to remaster? Because, oh well, we didn't change completely everything with the game, so now all of a sudden, even
But
though we're remaking the game,
maybe the issue is
we don't get called a remake
that we
anymore. You know?
and maybe the issue is, and maybe this is partly, I guess, us as people who have an audience or whatever, is that maybe we just shouldn't put um, any weight into what those terms mean, because people are using them differently. Before this, I was trying to research, what's the general consensus from like what video game media and gamers are saying on Reddit. And I was just looking up like what's a remake versus a remaster in video games. Literally typed it in Google, read I don't know, a couple dozen websites, and watched a few videos. I'm like, nobody agrees on any of it.
Yeah.
All anyone can agree is that remake means it's better than a remaster.
Yeah.
That seems to be the only consensus, and I just hate that idea that you could have a remake that's worse than what a remaster would have been. I don't think that should be a mutually exclusive way to think about it. Like Final Fantasy VII, the reimagining that is technically falls in the remake category, could have been horrible. It could have not worked. It appears to have worked. I can't speak from personal experience, but it appears to have worked from those I've talked to that have played it.
I've played and beat it. No, it works. It definitely works. I mean, I think it's a great game. I gave it a 9.
I think the only main criticism I've seen is either if you don't like the system, which you weren't going to like the combat system, if you don't like action RPGs, you're not going to like it. That's fine. But and then obviously people don't like that it's split up. Like this is only the first part. There's going to be more coming, so it's not really the full game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a full game, but then it's like
I think people are just happy that they got this much.
Yeah, I mean,
like where it ended from what I read, where it ended. Well, that makes a good.
And I think
you just know there's more.
I think I think that's one of the things with people today is that if you simply went off your history, then we probably wouldn't have these issues. And I think that's where I'm coming from. If you simply just go off of history instead of trying to make up your own definitions as time goes along, then be confused as hell and stumble along and say, oh, well, I didn't call it a remaster back then, but I'm calling it a remaster now because my definitions changed. Instead of just doing that, maybe we can just go by really the basis that we have. Drastically improve the visuals, drastically improve, added things, definitely code changed. It's not just the same thing because we've seen what happens when code is the same. We've generally seen it. When you add a lot of the things, and add a bunch of models and add a bunch of different things that are added in, maybe there's some things that's left over. That's fine. New games are still new games when they borrow some things. So I think that if we can just move towards that, because it's pretty clear what a remaster would look like if they dolphined it on the Switch. We've seen it before. We've seen the people literally custom do that and spend a lot of time retexturing.
I've seen it in 4K.
So if we can just keep the definition how it was, which was when Twin Snakes came out, and with all these games that were also being remade that have came out before Resident Evil, it would be much easier to figure things out instead of saying, well, Final Fantasy came out and that completely redid things and that's called remakes. So since that's called remake, that game has to do
I was thinking,
or Resident Evil came out and it's completely different from what I played before, but it's kind of the same because the layout's the same and the same characters. So but it's completely different. Like instead of doing all that, can we just literally use our eyes?
Well, what happened? I just from my own perspective, what happened with me and maybe what a preconceived definition I might have had that I just wasn't using at the time altered is because I realized thinking back that there's some things that the reason that people dismiss remaster way more quickly than remakes is because a lot of the HD porting that's been going on over the past 15 years or whatever it's been that people have been HD porting games. And like what happened is I started just dismissing it. Oh, it's just a port. Like, oh, it's an HD, but it's just a port. Like, and I was guilty of just dismissing. Like, that doesn't mean it's any less of a game per se, but it's just the same game in HD. It's just a port. And that's what a lot of people kind of look at with the remaster versus remake, where they devalue what a remaster is, because they have that mentality of, well, a lot of the games I saw growing up were just port. They were just HD ports, and that's what people call the
Those were
remaster.
remasters.
Yeah, and I never called them remasters, and so but I understand, and that shows to me like your clear line in the sand of there's the remaster and then this is the remake. I get your clear line; it is extremely clear, it's crystal clear. But that's just not the way that people growing up right now are starting to view things.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that. I think people are trying to make their own definitions now.
What people? What people are making? I mean, you're gonna say me, but besides,
well, you are though, because when Devil May Cry would come out in these games were clearly remastered. That's what remasters were. There was a pretty clear definition. Hey, here's a remaster. We've improved the frame rate. We've improved the quality of the game. It's still the same game that you know and love, but we've improved it with this. It looks the same. It just runs at a higher resolution, sometimes a higher frame rate, not. You know what I'm saying? But they didn't completely change the models, completely change, the UI, completely change so many different things. So I don't think we should be changing stuff like that, because the remasters have been around and we've had a clear definition of what they were. We have, and now all of a sudden we don't have a clear definition. I have a clear definition in terms of what I know. I'm not a developer, so I can't sit there and strip down the code and see everything, but I see enough remade that's clearly from my eyes remade to say, you know what? Yeah, this is definitely above and beyond what we've seen with the typical remaster. Because I have a ton of remasters. Heck, I have Devil May Cry. I have Devil May Cry Trilogy. I have so many remasters that look exactly the same as they looked on previous systems, but they run a little bit better. They're sharper. They're in better resolution. But then Xenoblade comes around and the models look completely different. The UI looks completely different. They've completely changed a bunch of different things in there. They've added a whole new The Future connected thing, so that wasn't remastered from anything. They've added completely different things. It looks different enough. Gameplay, that's fine. Gameplay can be the same. Metal Gear Solid was like that. You know what I'm saying? Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes was like that. So who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like, we've had games to say. Still, the game was still remade. I
think it just gets back to culture, how you grow up, how you view things, your personal opinions, and then people just redefining things to mean what they want it to mean. I mean, I hate using this example, but it's one that everyone can clearly know from the English language, like the word gay. It used to just mean happy. It's literally in a popular cartoon series intro song, have a gay old time. Like, that over time started shifting to a derogatory term. And now it's being recaptured as a positive term, but it doesn't mean exactly what like the original word was clear in what it meant. And I think
it's context. No, hold up. It's context how you use it. You can say have a gay old time all you want to, and that's
nobody uses it that way.
Nobody uses that way anymore.
That's what I'm saying. There was a time before me. There was a time before all of us probably watching when the transition from that word meaning just happy to meaning a slur at the time.
Even if you use it in today's day, it's not a slur in terms of how it is. That's not a slur.
Have you ever seen anybody use it to mean happy?
No, because it's an old way of speaking. It's an old way of speaking.
And that's what the word was. But that was why the word was created.
That doesn't apply here because we've had many modern examples of exactly what I'm talking about, and now you guys are trying. But
you could argue. You could argue.
That's the problem.
Just like there was a transition period for that, we could be in a transition period now.
We're actually not in a transition period. We're in a period.
Well, look what's happening with remakes.
We're not in a transition period.
They're getting a lot done to them now.
Okay, so did it just start now, or when did it start? When did this transition period start?
I don't get a chance to play every game out there, but I guess the first time that I saw that a remake really started going the extra mile was maybe the RE2 remake, or I guess that's the place where I probably first saw the remake started getting a lot more put into it.
I mean, but that's remakes a lot more put into it, but it's still not the clear definition of what we've had before. So you can say a lot more put into a remake. That doesn't discredit or change what a remake is. Reimagining should be more of the thing. If you guys want to say this,
I know,
place. You know,
A
and I think that
reimagining is actually
yeah.
part of the definition of a remake, unfortunately. That's where I get confused when I was reading all this stuff. Everyone, like the one thing, there was like basically two things that everyone agreed on in all the stuff I read. One, that remakes are just more important or a bigger deal than a remastering. And two, a reimagining, which is definitely like, well, I think we can all agree that's what Final Fantasy is. It's what some other games have been. Technically is also a remake because it fits the definition of remake. So it ends up getting to this point where now even remakes have like multiple tiers of what a remake is, and then that starts to become, I
So
think, where you have a whole nother
maybe
split. Like,
you know what maybe a cool thing to do would be, instead of trying to label one thing because you don't feel it does enough, how about you just label it like how it's supposed to be based on the definition that we've always had. And that's the
but
like,
the
you know,
definition that you have
that
is
we've
is based
always
on.
had. We've
But
always had the
but
definition of a remake
okay,
being
well
stuff
if I
being
use it,
remade.
okay,
You
if
know,
I use
like
it,
so
but
why is it
here's the
being
thing.
pushed? Wait, hold up. Why is it being pushed aside because you feel that it's
No,
not
no,
enough? So
my
therefore, this
definition
is
hasn't
not.
changed. But my definition has never changed. If it's reusing the code base, it's a
But you don't
remaster to
know.
me.
But then you
But you
haven't.
don't know that it's not.
But we can. I can use my eyes and I can see because we
You're
can't
talking
strip
about
down.
visual elements that aren't
Yeah,
necessarily part of the
we
code.
can't
You're
strip.
talking about
We can't strip down code, Nate. We can't do it. So I look and I see, and I clearly see
we can
remade
do it.
things. I see plenty of things remade, and I use my eyes. Okay.
So we can't strip down code. That's
So
why we
your
can data mine
definition,
stuff from because we can't strip it down.
we can't strip down and see it. You tried to claim that Shadow of the Colossus is a remaster of a remaster, and it's clearly not. So your
I don't know
definition,
if it's a remaster of the
you're
PlayStation 3
you're
version, but
saying
I
it's a
think they did
remaster of a
reuse code.
remaster.
I think they reused code, yeah.
So that means it's a remaster of a remaster.
Well, it depends if they reuse the slightly altered code of that remaster, or if they went back to the original code base and reused that. Because every remaster has altered.
Why would they go back to the original code base and remaster that when
Because
they already
maybe when they
remastered
brought
it
in the
once?
PlayStation, no, because this is why. Because when they imported the PlayStation 3 code into the new engine, it didn't run as well as when they imported the original.
See, now you're just speculating on things. You're
I'm talking
speculating
about
on
I'm talking
literally
about how a game
the
I
developers
know
said
this
that
as
they
I
remade
know
the
this as
game.
someone who's done it. Like
They
I know that's
the
how it works.
developers literally said that they remade the game. Now we can't trust developers on a remake. Now is that what you're saying? If they say the game is remade, now we're saying that well we don't know. They might have used the you're telling me they used the PS2 code for the PS4? Is that what you're saying? So then what happened to all the work that they did with the graphics? The game looks so much better. What about all that work that they made remaking models and textures?
Yes.
All that's just ported,
You
imported?
you are you are confusing art and code. They are not the same. Graphic design people, the modelers are not the same thing as the actual code base the game runs on. You can have people remake art assets and not.
It's clear that it's not that. It's clear that they had to do a lot of work with this game. I mean, like, the problem that I have that you're doing, Nate, is that, like, you're not... you're sitting
All
there
I know
and
is
all I know
when
is that
I
they
watch
said it's a remake.
when I watch the videos, right? When I watch the videos out there, and yeah, there's some increased facial expressions and all that, clearly new additions to the game. But when I'm watching them running through the fields, when I'm watching the combat, like it's all the same animations that they were using before, and those animations are in the code base, which means they copied over the code base. They just added in addition to that code base to get the extra animations and stuff on top. And yeah, they altered the UI because that's a quality of life.
So
well, there's new code. There's new code in every game that's ported,
and they made new models.
Yeah, but that's nothing to do with the code.
And they made new AI.
I didn't say they made new AI.
Oh, sorry, UI.
They changed the UI. Yeah.
So they made new. It doesn't look the same. They created new UI.
Well, yeah, but it could be using the same code base from the old.
They made new UI. They made.
You're talking all about art.
They made a bunch of new stuff. They remade a.
This is why I asked you if they would have took the art and just made it completely look like the original game, but running in the new engine with the new content. Would you call it a remake? And then you started going on. It depends on this. It depends on that. And I'm just like,
I said that if they remade a bunch of stuff, then they remade it. Like,
but everything you're talking about remaking is just art assets. So to you, it's just art assets.
Art assets. It's not just, it's 3D modeling, dude. It's not just art.
3D modeling is art.
It's more
Literally,
than just art.
when you go into graphic design, it includes 3D
I
modeling. It's art.
I understand that, but obviously there's new animations too that weren't in the original. So there's also animations as well, not just art.
Yes. I'm not saying they didn't add things to it.
Oh, so then
but what they added to it didn't fundamentally change the game.
And that's not the definition of a remake. If it fundamentally changes the game or not, Nate. Shadow of the Colossus is not a remaster.
When a song is remade,
and it's not
when a movie is
changed.
remade, hold on. When a song is remade, but here's the thing: if anything is remade in any other media, it's different than the original, like completely different, not just visually.
That's not how it is in this medium. Shadow of the Colossus is proof.
So again, so we can agree. So we can agree that your definition. Hold on. So we can agree that your definition is based on your experience and your personal opinion.
My definition
because
is based
a remake in every other medium is a brand new thing.
Gaming is not every other medium.
It's an entertainment medium.
But it's not every other medium. There's clearly things that happen in gaming that don't happen in other
So
mediums.
there go the definition that has existed before gaming did anything.
I'm talking about the definition within what gaming is done.
But the definitions you were using the definition you were using for remaster is the exact definition that has been used by music and
says that a game that's clearly a remake is a remaster.
Your definition is that an HD port is a remaster because that is what a remaster is, and that is what it is in music, and that is what it is in movies and everything.
Developers have stated what it is. Developers have clearly stated that if they increase the quality, that it's remaster. If they remake things,
so here's the problem. Why is the definition of a word changing depending on the medium?
It's not changing. You are taking an outside medium and trying to force feed it into gaming.
But how is it not changing then? Because if the outside mediums that were using video games before video games, that it was clearly defined what a remake was. Video games came along, and now the word doesn't mean what it means.
Different. When you have a different medium, you do different things. What they do in movies is completely different than what they do in gaming. What they do in gaming in terms could be different in movies. You trying to force feed the definition from movies into
but why does it? It doesn't have to be different. But why does it have to be different? Why does it have to be different? In movies, they restart from the ground. Why can't that be what it is in gaming? Remake from the ground up.
Because gaming is completely different than movies.
But why does the definition have to change when clearly there are games that are remaking from the ground?
Gaming is completely different than movies, Nate. It's not the same. And we've had this same thing where you're literally retroactively saying these developers didn't make remakes.
I don't care what developers say. What developers say. Okay. No, I don't, because they're marketing. If you hear any public word from them, it's all marketing. They're just marketing.
So developers have no say in this.
In how it's defined? Yeah. They do with obviously fans that just listen to what they say and just go with it. Yeah, sure. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're right. I find
that ridiculous that you would sit there and say that developers have no say in this when they're the ones who are making the game.
Okay, here's the deal. Did you know that the team that made Twilight Princess HD has a developer interview and they called it a remake? Is it a remake?
It's obviously a HD remaster.
So why does it matter what they say?
Because developers are the ones who make the game, and they make technical terms.
Oh, so then it's a remake. And so you're just going, if the developers say what it is,
I didn't see that. And once again,
well, it's okay if you didn't see it.
I didn't see that. But once again, I agree to you to an extent. All I'm trying to say is that if a developer feels that it is something, we should at least give some credence to it when our eyes tell us one thing. I'm never telling you to deceive our eyes. You're saying, well, since the developer said that, I can use my eyes. I can look at Shadow of the Colossus and see that, this is a lot of changes. You are saying, oh, well, since the developer says it, it's that. No, I'm not saying. I use my eyes. And that's what I said to Conrad, and that's what I said to people. I can see.
And here's the thing. I use my eyes, too. Was Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, bringing it all back. I use my eyes. I compare trailers, compare footage. There's some new facial animations. Everything else, it looks pretty much the same, just prettier.
The models look completely
the same. My eyes tell me it's a remaster.
Your eyes. What? So your eyes tell you that it's completely the same, based off of what we've seen the models.
Again, the models are just. Again, you keep going back to art assets. Yes, they completely changed out the art assets. It doesn't mean it's a different game. And I know you're not saying it's a different game because your definition doesn't work that way, but that's the way it is for me. When I watched, what is it? What's that recent? I hate bringing up. I'm not going to go back to the example again, but it was a movie example about like Hollow Man or whatever. I recently watched it. It was a remake of it, but it was completely different. And I just view video games as the same way. I've always viewed it as a remake is you're taking something that used to exist and just completely remaking it and being, in whatever fashion you want to remake it. Whereas remaster to me is taking something that already exists and just building on top of it.
So what you're trying to tell me is that technically, like I said, so you're on the belief that they remastered the Shadow of the Colossus twice, and that Crash Bandicoot and all those games are just remastered. Those are all remastered, even though developers, they all say that they're remade. Everybody said that they're remade, but now because of the definition being changed in 2019 with Resident Evil, now they've changed, and now we're saying those games aren't remade. Those games are now remastered. So what you're saying that we're retroactively changing.
In terms of Crash and Spyro, I can't talk specifically about them because I haven't played it. I haven't played the originals, haven't played the remakes, remasters, whatever they're called. I haven't played. So I feel sacrilegious as a gamer for me to admit that, but I didn't play those back in the day when I was a kid. But I didn't. I was a strictly Nintendo. Didn't play those things. Didn't buy them when they came back out again. Didn't have any interest for me. And I realized Spyro, I think, was on Nintendo before. I just never dabbled. I mean, a lot of it comes down, again, I think, to just personal experience. This is what it's always been for you, so that's what you view it as. I didn't experience some of these games. I didn't experience that way. A lot of my experiences with ports, remasters, whatever, remakes are all probably within the last, I don't know, 8 years that I've even paid attention. Not even, maybe like the last 4, because before I did Nintendo YouTube stuff, I was a Zelda guy. I literally just covered Zelda games for 20 years. I played other games. I didn't really think that deeply about them. I just played them and enjoyed them. Kind of miss those days sometimes. When I was just a gamer, you didn't really care about anything else. Besides Zelda, I always had a deep dive into Zelda. And now that, I'm this Nintendo YouTuber and I have to deep dive into even topics like this, like I've had this discussion, I think one other time during a live stream. And I think it just leads to the only thing I ever get out of the discussion is how frustrated I am that people even care if it's called a remake or a remaster in the first place. Who really cares?
Well,
maybe the developer, maybe there's a personal pride thing as a developer, but if you're a fan looking at a game, you shouldn't dismiss it if you think it's a remaster. You shouldn't dismiss it if it's a remake. You should just look at what it is. Do you like it? Cool, play it.
And I agree. I'll get to donations in just a bit once we get towards the end, guys.
Yeah, I've had a couple.
And I agree. In terms of we should just play the game, and yeah, I think developers will do that. But like I said, the problem that I have is like this revisionist history. We're starting to revision things, and I'm definitely not gonna let my audience think this nonsense, because so many of them ask me the same thing that comes here with this, like, oh well, it must be a remaster because Final Fantasy did this and Resident Evil did this, completely ignoring literally decades and decades of work and stuff that's gonna happen in the future. It's not just from 2019 and on. It's not just from there. There's game 2020, like Panzer Dragoon. That's remake. Panzer Dragoon remake. I didn't hear zero people questioning whether this was a remake or not based off the gameplay that we first played.
Is that a popular game? I'm just wondering.
Panzer Dragoon, it's a niche audience. It's a niche audience.
Yeah, because I think sometimes with some of those games, because they're not that popular, so people aren't talking about them.
But everybody,
so they just don't care.
But everybody,
like Xenoblade, people cares. People care about Xenoblade because it's Switch exclusive, and we just had 1.5 million plus of Xenoblade 2 sell, so it's actually a decent seller.
1.7 was the last time that we heard.
Last update, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that, like I said, it's being used in a certain way.
Plus,
go ahead.
We have to consider this. Mm-hmm. We are in a quarantine situation where everything's being pushed back, and we have nothing else to talk about. So people are just debating pointless things as well on the internet right now.
No, but I think it's a good debate. There's nothing wrong with people who are saying that this is useless or whatever. You guys are here watching. What are you talking about? If it's useless, then go away.
I think they're just here to see us go at each other.
That's fine, but if it's useless, then that's fine.
Entertainment
It's entertainment for you guys. So people say, this is useless. Okay, this is useless yourself and watch something else. All right, we're creating entertainment for you guys, so chill. We're just simply talking.
My first video this week. Come on.
And on top of that, I haven't gotten heated. I haven't yelled at Nay. I haven't done anything.
No.
So
if you guys ever saw our last debate over the EA Nintendo thing, that's a heated debate.
Yeah, that's heated.
We got pretty heated, but we were all cool by the end whatever. But like it got heated. There was some passionate arguing both.
Whereas this,
that's way
we're simply discussing, and sometimes we shake our head or go like this or whatever the case is.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, this again.
But that's not a problem. So for the people that just say this is pointless, then feel free to point your ass somewhere else. Then
I do this with Eric on the
relax and watch it, enjoy the content, and pick a side, do whatever you want to do.
And that's what my friends do when they have a discussion and they like. If you ever watch like the Nintendo Prime podcast, Eric and I disagree all the time. We're just all shaking our head. He's getting ready to slap me, and I'm getting ready to hit him in my hat, and it's just we're just friends, just talking. It happens.
Yeah,
you don't have to agree on everything.
So what I'm trying to say here is like basically, I mean, kind of get to this. I think that the definition should definitely keep the same as we've had the definition, and we're gonna see more of this in the future. I think that these particular examples of stuff that, like, let's say Resident Evil or whatever the case, where they sometimes even remove stuff from what they had before, they add in certain things, you can still have different types of remakes. You can completely have, and I think that's where like it probably be a little more inclusive. You can have different types. A game can be the exact same and be remade with a bunch of remade things in the game, but still have stuff that's similar and still be considered a remake, like we've always had it before. Remake is not a new term.
A remake is a much broader definition for you than a remaster.
Absolutely, because we're starting to see quite a number of different things with these remakes, like Final Fantasy VII, reimaginings, reboots, whatever the case is, where they completely take a story or what happened. I think Tomb Raider was another one of those games where they completely took the original,
Tomb Raider was the original reboot,
story and just completely do things differently. So
that was a franchise reboot. I think they call it.
Yeah, a franchise reboot. So you can take something, you can say, hey, we're going to remake it or reboot it this way, or we're going to remake it, we're going to keep it faithful, and then add a bunch of stuff in there, make it look way better. There's a lot more things that you can do because it's not just a simple remaster. I think that anybody can sit there and you can use your eyes and you can see that, Xenoblade, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil, all these games do a bit more than what Devil May Cry does. Devil May Cry 2 on the Wii, on the Switch, right? Look at Devil May Cry 2. Is that to the level of what they did? Are there new models in there? Are there new textures? Did they do a bunch of that? It's the same game. It looks the same. It's a shiny PS2 game. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing. Dante looks just as crappy as he did on the PS2 with Devil May Cry. They didn't do anything much when it comes to that game. They did a little bit more with Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition, but it definitely does not look drastically different, when it comes to like Xenoblade. So there's definitely levels of it to it, and I think it should be broad. There definitely should be like, there's a lot of stuff remade in this game. Definitely a remake. They completely reimagined everything. That's how I saw it. I didn't see it as an exclusion tactic, which many people are seeing it as, well, since they didn't do this, that means this is a problem, and that's a remaster now. And it's like, well, wait a minute. In years past, it never was a remaster. Hold up. Metal Gear Solid didn't do much. I mean, better graphics, game looks good, added a couple different things. That's a remake. Nobody said it was a remaster. Nobody said that. I mean,
I guess the problem for me is a lot of your definitions for remaster, I've separated out as not even being a remaster, just being a port, an HD port, or just a port in general. You're just bringing it to a new platform.
But an HD port and a remaster are the same thing.
But I don't view them as the same thing. Never have.
Why?
Because, again, literal definition of remaster in other mediums would apply here, where it would be considered to be a remaster. And this is where I get in a problem, because I was trying to use a literal definition for remake to show why it doesn't, why I think some things are remasters that you don't. But I think remasters can be broader.
You increase the quality. Remaster, you increase the quality. Like if a game was non-HD and it became HD,
by pure definition of remaster, right? Based on how remaster has been used in other mediums, you are correct. And I think the problem is if I'm going to take what I used to separate out as ports and just say those are remasters, okay, then to me the definition of remaster is much bigger and broader than you view it as.
Remasters have just been ports with upgrades.
We're on opposite ends of the spectrum, where you view remakes as having a much broader spectrum. I view remaster as having a broader spectrum. Honestly, they both cross each other, and I know we've already said, like, ultimately it doesn't. I don't think it matters. I'm just being completely honest. When you said you wanted to debate today, I was like, sweet, we haven't done that in a while. That's the first thought that came to my mind. I wasn't like, oh man, I'm get PlayerEssence today. It's just like,
no, it's fine.
I don't think it matters. Like it doesn't.
But it's a good discussion.
I don't know. It matters to gamers, I guess.
Absolutely, it's a big topic of
Never
discussion.
mattered to me. It's never mattered to me. This is how I've always defined it. This is what it's always been to me. I've always separated ports out. Fine, you want to throw ports in with it. Doesn't really matter. To me, remaster has the broader definition and remake has the narrower definition because it's really narrow in every other medium but video game. That is, then remaster is really wide in other mediums.
What games were remakes before this new age of your thinking? What games were remakes?
Oh, man. Putting me on the spot here because I played a lot, mostly just Nintendo stuff growing up.
Well, you can look and you just from your eyes, right? Because you're saying that you're looking at Xenoblade and you're saying, "Well, I see it, and it's remastered. It's not remade." So what games?
I'm trying to think back on Nintendo games I played that were remade that I felt was a remake. Because I didn't feel. Nintendo didn't do a lot of that stuff in the early days.
Well, any company.
Well, I didn't play the other stuff, so it's hard for me to come up with examples and play them. So that's the problem. Like you have a wider gaming knowledge than I do on all systems. Because I didn't own a PlayStation 1, didn't own a PlayStation 2. I literally was Nintendo only until Xbox 360 came out. And then I didn't even own that for most of the gen. And then I have a PlayStation 3 back here, but I barely played anything on it. I got it just to play MLB The Show, basically. So
see, this might be time to change your definition of what a remake is. If you can't think of a single thing.
Well, no, it just means that when I was younger, I didn't play games that I felt were remake.
Well, I'm just talking you know gaming, so I'm just saying like pick a game before this whole thing that is by your definition a remake. Then. I know you know gaming. I mean, you've been on this podcast. You talk gaming all the time.
Yeah, I know. Just gotta talk gaming all the time. This is where people start to call me a fraud. Just gotta talk gaming all the time doesn't mean I have time to. I'm a father of 3, stay-at-home dad. I'm homeschooling. Like I don't have time to game. If I'm being completely honest, only game I've played in the last month has been on Animal Crossing. So. I know, it's okay. The other people have called me a fraud before because like I don't have all this time to game.
I've been called a fraud too. It's all good.
It's like I don't. I wish I would have like literally one of the things I'm excited for with PlayStation 5 is that all the PlayStation 4 games are supposedly backwards compatible. So finally, I'll actually play all the PlayStation 4 games since I never owned one.
Yeah.
So honestly, this next gen coming up with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are the first time I'm actually going to be trying to play a whole bunch of stuff, wider variety than Nintendo. So like when I think back on Nintendo hasn't actually done a lot of remakes when I was growing up.
Really?
And even when I think of now, like I still don't consider most of what they make as remake.
Are you what about like Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver? Those were remade.
Yeah, here's the problem with Pokemon. I stopped playing after Gen 2, so
you can use your eyes and you can. See
I can, but I didn't even look at them. Okay. I didn't look at them back then, and I haven't looked at them because again, I was just doing Zelda back then, so it was the games I wanted to play, and then Zelda. So, I didn't pay attention to the news on anything.
This might be a perfect time. I'm telling you, Nate, this might be a perfect time for you to change your definition because you couldn't.
But I can't change my definition on experience.
Think of a single game, my man. I can give you plenty of games that developers, that people at the time were said that were remade, and we don't have this revisionist history. I can give you so.
But
many
I'm not
examples.
Revising my history. I don't have examples because I didn't consider the things to be remade.
You don't have any history, but you're going back and saying that games that you never really called remasters. I don't think you did, but maybe you did, maybe you didn't.
I didn't really use those terms.
You didn't really use any terms, but now you're saying based on what you think now, oh, those are remasters. So you're basically it's revisionist because at the time those weren't called remasters.
It's revisionist to the people who It's revisionist to people who already had their set definition. It's not revisionist to me.
Well,
I'm not changing.
Then that's ignorance, then, right? If you're not willing to look at how things were done in the history, and you're saying, well, I didn't have that, so therefore I'm going to think this way. That's called ignorance. Is it not?
We're just talking about the definition of terms.
No, well, we're talking about, you're saying, well, you have no experience with some of this stuff. And now you're saying, well, my experience is now in what this is done. Well, when somebody tells you, well, this is how it was done before, you say, well, no, that's not my definition. I thought about it this way. even though you had no experience. That sounds
bring
like
up a game bring up a game from like the early 2000s that you think was a popular remake at the time that I would reckon.
Heart Gold Soul Silver.
Okay. The only reason I might consider that a remake is because this is just what I've been told. Me just looking at it, the visuals are different. Looks like the same game to me, but they added a bunch of stuff apparently that was from other generations into it. I heard, or was that a later Pokemon remake?
They added a bunch of stuff, but it's the same core gameplay that we've gotten.
Yeah, so to me, it'd be a remaster. I would have called that a remaster back then.
You would have called it, but it's clearly a remake of the game, and that's how everybody sees it. It's clear it's not the same game.
You want to know? What's a Pokemon remake to me?
Yeah.
Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee.
Those are remakes. Those are also remakes.
But that's the first time I consider a Pokemon game to actually be a remake. All the other ones, I think they're just milking and remastering.
I don't think you played Pokemon's Heart Gold Soul Silver. People consider it one of the best in terms of remakes out there. Fire Red, Leaf Green, they also did that as well, where they added a bunch of stuff into the game. Same core gameplay, but they added a bunch of stuff.
They added stuff from over the years.
They added a lot of stuff. So yeah, I
mean, and that's why I said it's hard for me to speak because I didn't play the games. I fell out of love with Pokemon, so I didn't like a lot of the new stuff. So I don't really care if they added that new stuff in. So to me, it's hard for me to try to look at it objectively, I guess, in this case, because I don't have the experience with it. Just looking at it from the outside, looking in, it looks like a remaster to me. But
it's definitely.
This kind of goes into what something that Conrad I think said on Twitter, where you said, I can see with my eyes that it's this, and he said, well, I need to experience it to know. And I think this is the situation here. With my eyes, that looks like a remaster to me. But if I play it, I might feel it's a remake instead.
See, that's weird. One, I would say that's weird because usually remakes, like what we've had before, you can clearly tell. When I looked at Metal Gear Solid, I was like, yo, this is a remake. When I looked at Resident Evil 1, I was like, yo, this is a remake. I don't think there really is any blurring of lines here. I think you guys are, like I said, you guys are creating your own definition and being ignorant to the past. Because now you're saying, well, that's not a remake. I would call that a remaster when everybody called it a remake. It was literally, the game was literally
back
remade
then
for the new
back
system.
When those, just a question.
Like,
I have a question for you.
That's the reason why I say this is revisionist history. Is because you guys are ignoring stuff because you're saying...
When you were younger, were you using those terms? Or were you just playing games? Before you did any YouTube, anything.
Absolutely.
On the playground, were you having those debates?
When I saw a game and it was completely new graphics and everything like that, yo, this game is remade for this system. I called it remake.
Oh my god, that wasn't even a debate that happened around it. We just said, man, that game looks...
I said it was cool, but we just said, yo, the game is being remade with new graphics, with completely new things. It was a remake. It was the developers in the magazine said, yo, we're remaking this game for this system with updated visuals and all this stuff like that.
Just a different childhood experience. When I was a kid and I was talking to people, it just wasn't even a thing that crossed our mind. Because for a lot of us, if it's a remake or a remaster, we probably didn't play the game the first time. So what are we even talking about? Because we don't have the knowledge.
Well, because so many people played Metal Gear. Like Metal Gear was sold.
Yeah, it was a big deal back then.
It was a big deal. So then when it was being remade, a lot of people played Metal Gear. Metal Gear sold like 10 million
I was one of the few that did.
Many people played Metal Gear. So when we saw Twin Snakes, we all said, we didn't say this is a remaster or this is the re-release. We all said, yo, this game is being remade for the GameCube. When we saw, Resident Evil 1, people played Resident Evil 1 on the PS1. That was a popular game.
Yep.
And then we saw it on the GameCube. Yo, this game is remade for the GameCube. Like, this is not a new
I guess it just wasn't. It just wasn't a terminology that I used as a kid. Back then, we just said we just looked at it as, man, this game looks so much. It would be, oh man, this game's now on GameCube. Was on PlayStation 1. Look how much better this thing it looks like on GameCube compared to that. It was all about graphics and visuals and just eye candy and being like, man, this game looks amazing.
Nate, but that's just a play of words in terms of things. One of your friends could at least said, yo, they're remaking the game for the GameCube. Nobody said that? You're trying to tell me that nobody said they're remaking the game.
No, they just said they're bringing. Hey, did you hear the Resident Evil's coming over to GameCube with better visual?
Y'all didn't have a dictionary back then? Like, you couldn't use the common term of a remake? Like, a remake is it's not like a very weird word to use when you're talking about thing. Things.
But
Like,
again, this goes back to remake, and every other medium has a very definite line on what a remake is. And in gaming, you have a much broader definition of what it is. Growing up, we didn't have that broad definition. It was just this game's coming to this platform. It just looks better than it did on the other platform. And by your definition, just that basis of an argument alone, that could just be a remaster. That's not saying that it is a remaster. I don't have the personal knowledge to have that conversation for that game, but it's just
based on my definition, with graphics and models completely remade, right? Which is what's happening with Xenoblade. Even though gameplay is similar, same thing with Metal Gear. Movement and gameplay was similar, but the graphics were completely remade. My definition has stayed true throughout this whole thing. It's your definition and many of these revisionist people online that are taking it and creating their own because of Final Fantasy VII Remake and because of other things, or they have no history. They don't know what they don't know the history and say, well, I just called it whatever I wanted to call it. And then now you guys are trying to make, this is what it is. Yet you're, like I said, being ignorant to what it actually was at that time. That's all I'm trying to say. Being ignorant to actually
and
what
I
it
could
was at that time.
and the easy is I could argue that you're being ignorant to what the term remake has always meant before games. So why do we have to change it for games? We don't have to change it for games.
I'm not being ignorant to that. I'm not being ignorant to that.
But you dismiss it. Every time I bring up other mediums that do it completely differently and they do it exactly the same across different mediums, we get to gaming, suddenly now the definition broadens out when a lot of that definition would be what a remaster is in all these other media.
Gaming, how you interact with gaming is completely different than how you interact with movies. It's not that it's being completely
dismissed, a personal interaction,
but it's maybe if you're playing The Last of Us, maybe you can say that's the same. But if you're talking about actual games, that was a joke for the people in the chat.
Yeah.
If you're talking about actual games,
I was like, be careful then. Last of Us Part 2 coming up. Be careful.
I'm going to get the game. If you're talking about actual games, it's a completely different way in terms of how developers do things. It's a completely different medium, how you interact, how you play it. It's physical. It's more than just what movies did. Movies didn't have a physical touch aspect.
I look at it also that
you know?
then how I interact with it should be different if it's a remake. If I'm interacting the same way with the same gameplay, it's not different.
It's being remade.
It just looks different. It just looks
still
different.
Being remade to look. Remake doesn't mean it means mechanically changed everything, and that's where your definition is wrong. The fact that you have to.
But that's what remake means in every other medium. Why are we changing it for games?
If there was a movie that looked like crap, okay, and then it was remade to have way better visual animations and everything like that, or visual. Maybe the animations were the same, but the visual, that's still a remake of a movie. You can call that a remake because they remade the movie. So if you want to sit there and put this movie thing in there, if they took a crappy looking version of a movie and made it the exact same, but it looked way better, you can say, yo, the movie was remade. It's still the same movie, but it was remade.
If it's the exact same movie, but it just looks better, it's a remaster.
You can call it a remake, though. They remade the movie. They used different processing techniques. They used different things to make the movie. If you want to call it a remaster, that's fine. You can call it a remaster. But usually what I see is let's say Bad Boys on Blu-ray and Bad Boys on DVD. Yo, it's been remastered to run in higher resolution. Still looks the same, but it's been remastered to run in a higher resolution.
But if you're going to remake Bad Boys, it'd be completely different than the original.
I understand that, but if you're looking at it from a point in terms of gaming, since you want to bring gaming and try to put everything to it, gaming, we've had the definition, or we've had it to where it can be the same game, but yet looks way better, and it's a remake.
I don't like altering definitions.
If you want to have
my world of entertainment,
it's not an alter of a definition. That's the thing.
But you're saying that it can't apply to gaming the same way because it's different, which means you have to alter the definition of what it means for everything. Well, you don't have to alter what it means for movies and TV and games or what, but you're altering what it means when you bring it to a different medium. Whereas I'm just like, this is what a remake is to me, period. I don't need to change its definition depending on what I'm doing. A remake is a remake.
But you're basing it off of movies, which is completely different.
Because I grew up with movies and music, and they existed before video games, and they set the standards for what a remake and a remaster is.
But they set the standards in their own medium.
But the standards are the same. But the standards are the same.
Clearly, because games aren't made the same way as movies are made. So why are the standards the same? I don't
The
get that.
music isn't made the same way as movies, but the standards are the same.
But music and movies aren't the same thing as games. Gaming is a completely different
And
medium.
music is not the same thing as a movie. What's your point? They still use the same
My point is
The
that a
definition doesn't
remake.
change.
My point is that your bootleg definition has not been the case since we've been doing remakes, and you're trying to slam it in here because Final
But it
Fantasy and
hasn't
other
been the
games
case.
came out. You
But
said
hasn't been the
yourself
case
you
to who?
couldn't even
Hasn't
name.
been the case to who?
You
But
have,
who?
bro,
Hasn't it been the
bro,
case
Nate,
to?
you have not named a single game that was a remake that you can think of before 2019.
I don't. Because
So
I
there's
don't.
been zero remakes, in your opinion, until 2019.
That's a lack of knowledge. That
You gotta
ignorance.
come to a
That's
debate
a lack
with
of knowledge.
knowledge. You can't sit here and tell me, well, I don't know, so there's no remakes, and you're wrong. Because the movie said this. You
I
can't name a
never
single
said.
game.
I never. Hold on. I never said there weren't remakes back then. I defined what I
Name-
consider a remake to be.
Name a remake before 2019.
Let me get the old Google out.
No, don't Google it.
Oh, I'm
Name a
sorry.
remake. You
I
should
already
know.
admit it.
You should
I already
know. Name one. Just give me some remakes. Give me a couple. Give me 3 so I can see your point. If you can't name one, your definition's trash, bruh. Let's just
No,
be
because the
real here.
definition's not based on the game. The definition is based on what the word means.
Are you mad?
This is what
I'm
a remake
sorry.
is.
I called your definition trash.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, let me just
I know what you meant. I didn't take it. Out. You're okay. I mean, the fans are probably going nuts right now.
No, everyone's laughing. All right, I called your definition trash. Your definition is misguided because you can't name a single game.
Because it's not based on the games. It's based on what the definition of remake means in every other medium. So yeah, there are probably remakes in my past that I can't think of and I don't remember.
So
and
yeah,
I had.
so
This is the problem. Here's
that's
the
a bad
problem.
definition. Wouldn't you say if
The
you
problem-
you come to a debate and you can't name a single game from your past?
I don't-
Nate, you're a seasoned gamer. I don't want to hear this. I don't know stuff, Nate. I don't want to hear it.
So
you're better than that. You're better than
OJ,
that. Yes,
OJ.
sir. Yes, sir.
Two things to explain here, because normally I completely agree with you. One, obviously, I had no time to prepare because I'm homeschooling my kids. So this debate, I got to check out some articles on my phone while I'm being a teacher, so it's not really the greatest way to research anything. And two, I don't know if you're aware of this. I try not to talk about it publicly anymore. I did suffer a traumatic brain injury last year, so my memory doesn't actually work that well. So I honestly don't even remember most of my childhood right now.
Let me
So,
tell you something.
That's why I can't recall things.
Did you forget what the definition of a remake was because of your memory? No, I'm just messing with you.
I just looked up. Well, no. And I don't want to use. This is the thing. I don't bring it up as an excuse. I know some people can tell sometimes when I'm off on certain things I'm talking about that maybe I used to be more on about. And I try not to talk about it because it's more of a personal thing. But and I'm in recovery and things are what they are right now. It's a little difficult with all the COVID crap going on because I can't go in. But that's besides the point. That's why I'm literally trying to rack my brain and I'm drawing up like blanks, like anything before last year. It's like I don't know why I'm drawing blanks, other than that I draw blanks on a lot of things in my life. Apparently not on having children, but that's a whole different thing.
Okay, well, I mean, look. I mean, and I
so
think it doesn't
I'm
matter.
sorry that I feel unprepared.
No, it's fine.
I am unprepared. I will admit
it's
I'm
fine. It's fine. That's why I tried to get it. That's why I tried to ask you right away. So, and I know you have kids and all that stuff. I mean, I didn't really take too much time preparing because I remember.
Well, you don't need to.
Yeah,
you
I
have the
remember all of
knowledge.
this
You
stuff.
have the whole knowledge.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. So I mean, like, maybe hopefully in this discussion, I think we can clearly see that if we can't name a single game, and I'm trying to think of it in your way, like, well, let me think about games before in the past. I'm pretty sure there are some games that completely changed mechanically to fit your definition. But I think the issue is that those weren't separated from what, like Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver or Resident Evil or, these other games that came out that were just considered remakes. Like, they were all remakes, they were all remade or, whatever. People consider them
like I think the
new,
earliest game I can remember, but it's not. I don't even consider it a remake. It was like Jurassic Park. back in the day. But like, I think that was even a remaster. So I can't think of one that right now that I would consider to be a remake. I mean, I know that there's been Pokemon remakes, but then I didn't partake, so it's hard for me to talk about. Until Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, I
Yeah, which
partook in
was
that one. And I'm like, oh yeah,
20.
that's clearly a remake.
Yeah, which is 2018 for that one. So
Yeah,
definitely a remake. They said it was a
but
remake.
yeah.
You know,
Well, I didn't really care what they said. It just
well, our eyes tell us that it's Pokemon Yellow, and we see that the
and
graphics are greatly improved. We see that the gameplay
the
is
mechanics are a little
well. They
different.
changed
Throwing the
the
ball.
Pokeball, but the
Pokemon
general
are in the overworld now, instead of being
well,
random encounters.
that's just models that are just that's just the mechanics change in terms of the
But
models.
random encounters were like the big thing when Pokemon first came out, and that's the first game that it wasn't random. You knew what you were gonna fight or
Outside
what
of
you were gonna catch.
I guess like Pokemon, I guess like Let's Go or not Let's Go, Pokemon Go. You know that if you're counting that game,
Pokemon Go, yeah,
yeah,
that's a
which is it's kind
yeah.
of based
Well,
off of
which where
that.
the idea kind of came
But the
from. Yeah.
general core gameplay was, I mean, it was still the same. It was still U-turn based battles back and forth. I mean,
Well, that's just
you know,
that's also a Pokemon where it's been the same the whole time. Like they add new mechanics, but it's the same core gameplay behind every Pokemon game. But that
okay.
doesn't mean like when you bring up the model thing in like Smash Bros. It's like yeah, but if it's in a new Smash Bros. Game, it's clearly a new game just because
Well,
it reuses animations and models.
I think there might be
Potentially,
some
potentially.
confusion on my end, or at least maybe Ronald thinks that there's confusion. I have a clear definition for what a remake is. I have a clear definition. There's not a, and I've been saying my clear definition for what a remake is. If I see a number of changes in terms of the model that's remade, models are remade, textures are remade, music is remade. There's a number of remakes with it. It's not just the game that's smoother looking and HD and better frame rate. If I see a number of things that are remade and enhanced and fixed in the game that's clearly different from the other one, like Metal Gear Solid, like Shadow of the Colossus, like these games that we've had that are remakes, it's a remake to me. That's what it is. It is a remake to me. I have a very clear definition, and my definition holds true to pretty much any game, whether it's old or whether it's new. You can say, hey, Final Fantasy VII, you're using these characters, but they're completely remade and completely redone. Hey, look at this game, Xenoblade.
Well,
It's this game, but there's
but
completely new models, completely new UI, completely new
but
content that not
any
there
my
before.
definition can hold the old games too. Even if I can't think of examples, I don't need examples because maybe then there just wasn't remakes back then.
But there
I'm
was
not saying
remakes.
that's the case because
But
I
there
don't
was. See,
remember. So,
that's the problem, though. I'm looking at it
but
from
can
your
you?
point of view, and
Well,
there
okay,
were
from my
definitely.
point of view, then okay, you're the knowledge base. From my point of view, what old games would fit my definition?
It's hard to think of much, but the only thing I think somebody mentioned, somebody in the chat mentioned something in terms of yours because you have to completely change the gameplay completely for it to be a remake, which remakes didn't do that back then. They wanted to get people to know that hey, this is the game that you know and love, but we're making it much better graphics and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to think of really anything too much. I mean, I can't even really think of anything because your definition is so cloudy and so
But it's not cloudy.
it
A
is.
remake is rebuilding a game from the ground up.
Okay, but we're
Period.
not
That's
developers.
it.
But we're not developers, so we can't all peer into code and know what's changed and how much it's changed. And on top of that, you said if it's remade from the ground up, I mean, so what, the whole everything completely is so basically no games that I can think of completely remake everything to where the gameplay's not the same that are old. It's hard for me to think of games like that because most games that were remade, they wanted to take the same core base game and then give you even something better, build on top of that. You know, we didn't look into the code and we didn't see all of that. We just said, hey, look, like this is what it is. You know, the game is obviously looking a lot better. And games are look like this game looks way better. There's improvements. It looks a lot better. The UI's changed. Blah blah blah. So we said this is a remake. It was remade. Now your
my
definition is
entire
saying, well,
life,
if they take over the game, but it's
in
ported,
my
you know, I mean, it's just
in
like
my entire life, anything that's just looked prettier but it's the same game is a remaster. Doesn't matter how much prettier it looks or
okay,
how much effort was put into the prettiness of it. That's just effort. It's still why does the effort level change suddenly what the definition is? If it's prettier because they just HD'd the current assets or they put brand new assets in, it's still the same concept. They're just making the game look prettier.
it's not quite the same when it's completely new when they remake models. That's the whole point of like remaking. They remake things, right? You remake things. So if you're remaking a bunch of things, it's not just
But to me,
remastering. You're remaking.
but that's the
Remastering
thing.
is
My remake is
taking what you
about the
have
whole
and then making it
package.
look better. Remaking is taking what you have and saying, well, that's what it looks like, but here's what we want it to look like now, and we're going to
Yeah,
remake things.
but
There's a
that's the
clear
thing.
difference, Nate. And your definition,
but
your
my remake
definition is kind of
my,
garbage. I'll be honest. Like
it's clear.
it's kind of garbage.
It's clear cut though.
It's
You're
not.
just talking about
You
specific
can't name
things.
a game.
But dude, I'm
literally
talking
just
about.
said right now that there's no games that fit your I can't think of a single game that. Yeah, I can bring up countless examples of games that were considered remakes by developers, by journalists, by people. But now all of a sudden, none of that is that because we can't think of anything. If you have to think that hard to find out if the game is a remake, no, we do because I can't think of anything. We're talking about old games, guys. We're talking about super old
Because maybe they weren't remakes then.
But they were.
Just because they call them that doesn't make them remakes.
So that means your definition of remake, based on what you're saying right now,
is rebuilt from the ground up.
Anything at this point until what you think, until 2019 with like Resident Evil or 2018. That's ridiculous.
There's probably been games before that too. I just can't think of them right.
And if you can't think of them, maybe that definition's a problem. That's all I'm trying to say. If you can't,
or your broadened definition of that word is a problem. Because right now the difference is
nobody had a problem back then.
My remastering definition is broad. Your remake definition is
nobody had a problem back then. There was no problem with Crash
in your circle of people.
There was no problem online. There was no problem online. There was no problem with that.
There was barely any online back in the early 2000s.
There was definitely.
I was there. I was there at GeoCities running a website way back in 2007.
There was no, and you know what? There was no problem up until Xenoblade. There was no problem, but in 2018 with Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, when people calling those remakes and the gameplay's exactly the same.
But
there was no problem with Shadow of the Colossus. There was no problem with Metal Gear. Now there's a problem.
You say that because it's just what you're hearing in your circle. I've heard people debate this on every single one of those games.
I haven't heard a single person debate if Spyro is a remake or a remaster in terms of everybody called it a remake for the most part. Yeah, some people
I've had people debate.
Well, those people don't know what they're talking about then, if that's the case, because Final Fantasy
VII
that's
based on your definition.
And
your definition
is very much like
my definition. Yeah, my definition is like clear cut. That's literally what every medium. And if you want to change it for gaming, then but it doesn't matter if the old games are that way.
If you can't name a game in the 30, 40 years of us having that, and there's been clear remakes, developers can tell you that there's been clear remakes. If you can't name a single game, I'm sorry, that's not a good definition.
But your definition includes so much stuff in the term remake. Mine is just the opposite. It includes so much stuff in a remake. It does though.
It really does.
Yeah, because you're basically saying what besides a port with new visuals is a remaster.
Name a game and I can tell you instantly if it's a remake or a remaster based on what I look at. Go ahead, name a game.
The Wind Waker HD.
Remaster. Same base game. They remastered it. Twilight Princess remastered. Tokyo.
Funny about the Wind Waker HD. Hold on, the Wind Waker HD actually had half of its models redone and was built in a completely new engine. Okay. I still consider that
but it was still remastered. The models literally look the same too. They've got better shading and textures and stuff like that, but the basic artwork in terms of looking at it looks exactly the same. There is a far greater difference with Xenoblade, and I think we can all determine that. We all can
sure. That. There's a greater difference in Xenoblade. The art assets are much better, but we're also talking about a game that was
remade.
But yeah, and over half the art assets in the Wind Waker HD were remade.
Models in Xenoblade are completely new.
I understand that.
Okay.
Although some could be ported from Torna.
What were they ported from? Ported from what? Torna?
Like grass textures and stuff like that.
The grass textures were ported from Torna?
I'm just saying that some things they probably didn't necessarily make from the ground up. Developers reuse assets all the time.
Okay, but they're remaking the original game. They're not remaking Torna.
Oh my gosh.
So if they're building the game within using new assets and using new stuff, not the original,
But if they're
using
not
new
remaking
things.
assets, though, they're just using assets they already have.
It's the game that they're remaking. Even if they have those assets, that's fine. They can use those assets to remake an original game.
The point I was trying to make with the Wind Waker HD, because of the knowledge I remember on that and how it was developed and all that stuff, and the reason they were making that as a precursor to Breath of the Wild development for the Zelda team. The reason I bring that up is because it fits a lot of the things you're saying. It just doesn't have different enough models.
It actually doesn't.
It has a different UI, completely different UI.
Not really, but okay.
It does. It's completely different. Completely different from the GameCube. It is. UI.
Okay, and that's fine. But the game looks. It's clear that the game is.
Well, it looks the same. That there's a difference between the art style. That's the problem. The original Wind Waker on GameCube already looked really, really good because of the type of art style it is, and it ages very. Xenoblade Chronicles art style does not age well. I think we can all agree it doesn't age well. Some people thought it was blurry and a muddy mess back then, let alone looking at it through the lens of it being 2020 now. Obviously, games look so much better than that. Even people thought that was that was kind of a muddy mess, and now we see what that engine can do once it's had more work and more time put in.
I don't
agree with that per se. But
I don't think
I'm saying that it's an art style difference. If they basically if the Wind Waker would have been put into, say, I don't know, like a different art style that didn't age as well. And then all of a sudden, when they brought it to thing and they replaced the models, all of a sudden it looked just so much better. The difference you're talking about is an art style. The art style of Xenoblade needed much more improving upon than the one from Wind Waker, but they still remade the models. Just because it takes more effort to make that particular art style of models shouldn't change the definition. That's why I brought up the Wind Waker HD, because it's different.
What they're doing is
that's why I brought it up, because I think it's a remaster. We agree it's a remaster, but for completely different reasons.
They didn't completely remake the models, though.
They did, though. They factually did.
You just said it's 50%.
Remake over 50%. I said
but it's not completely.
So, do you think
Xenoblade is completely new models with the characters? It's not the same.
All the characters have new models. Have
you seen them? Have you seen the models? They've been releasing them. Yes. All the main characters have brand new models.
Yes, all the main characters in the Wind Waker had brand new models. That's what I'm trying to bring up. The reason that 50% of the art assets in the game is what I'm talking about.
The game was remastered, Nate. You know it. You're trying to fandangle.
Yes.
You're trying to fandangle.
Yes, it is. No, I'm angling that it had the same effort put into it as Xenoblade Chronicles.
How does it have the same effort? How do you know what has the same effort?
Literally, it was being developed by the core Zelda team. That's all they made for 2 straight years was that game. They didn't make anything else. They just worked on the Wind Waker HD.
They had some help from an outside team with that, from what I understand.
No, that was Twilight Princess HD. Twilight Princess HD was completely dumb.
Okay, but you're saying that they worked on that for 2 years?
Yes, they were trying to figure out HD game development.
They were trying to figure out HD game development. Okay, they were struggling because they were behind on HD. Okay?
Yes, they were trying to figure out HD game development, so they were experimenting with.
They did more work and overhauling things than Xenoblade, bruh. Like, it doesn't mean that. Like, you're really fixated on that, but I don't know why you are.
Because you're no, here's the thing. You have more knowledge on Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive. I completely agree on that. You've been following it much more closely. You're big into the game. You're big into RPGs, JRPGs, etc. So I know you have a much higher knowledge about what's happening with that game, all that stuff. I don't even remember the release comes out. I know is it next month? I can't remember. May 29th, yeah. And because I know Ninjala comes out a couple days beforehand. Anyways, so I know you have more knowledge on that. I know I have more knowledge on the development of HD. And from everything you have told me about Xenoblade Chronicles 2, or Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, sorry, that literally is what they did to the Wind Waker HD. Not Twilight Princess HD, the Wind Waker HD. And I still consider it a remaster. And you consider it a remaster because it visually looks similar.
You literally just said that it's 50% of the models. I don't know.
Over 50%.
But it's
over
not
50%.
It's not 100, so it's not.
And you don't know that it's 100 in this game either.
I can clearly see that it is by looking at the models.
So you can guarantee me that going in there, every texture in the game is brand new. Every single texture.
The character models. We were talking about.
Yeah, all the character models in the Wind Waker HD were brand new too.
Okay, every character model is in the Wind Waker HD. Every single character model is brand new. I don't know about that, but okay. If you want to say that, that's fine, Nate. If you want to say that every single character model in the Wind Waker HD is completely
Yes,
brand new,
they remade the character model.
every single thing in there. But it was
They
pretty clear
did.
they remastered the game. The game was remastered. We all know it
I
is.
the thing
My
is that's the
definition,
thing we
personally, my definition, okay, is when I clearly see that there is that. When I clearly see, okay, when I clearly see, and I've seen enough with Xenoblade. I've seen enough to see that this is actually more than what they're doing with
so
Wind
when they
Waker,
added new
based on my
animation
opinion.
in the Wind Waker HD, they added new animations, facial expressions. They added new facial expressions. They also added literally new combat moves in the game.
Okay.
They
It's
added
not
new
completely remade,
control
though.
mechanisms, new UI. They didn't add any new content per se.
What about the engine?
That's
What was the engine running on too? You know that?
God, off the top of my head, it was not the Wind. It was
Did they port the engine over to the Switch, or was it running on a new engine?
it was it was kind of like what's happening in Xenoblade, where it was an engine from the prior system modified and then modified again. Just like Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is not technically a new engine; it's a modified. I've been using it, so that's what they were using with the Wind Waker HD. But I can't remember exactly what it's called because Nintendo doesn't talk about their engine as often. They just mentioned it was put into a new engine.
And I understand that, but Nate, my definition still doesn't change in terms of remake. It really doesn't.
I'm just drawing the correlation that the way you're defining Xenoblade, what they did with the Wind Waker HD, you just don't think that way because it visually looks.
Nate, I've had countless examples of a remake, and you can't think of one before 2019 or before Pokemon.
Because maybe there wasn't one. Maybe there wasn't one. Just because they said, just because the developer says it doesn't mean that I believe.
What do you mean? What type of logic is that? There was no remakes before 2018?
There could have been, but I can't think of all the time. I'm sure there's some, as an example. I can think of one right now. Gotcha. Zork. Return to Zork.
Zork? I don't know what the hell that is.
Oh, there's an old school game you don't know about. So back in the day, when video games or gaming, a lot of things were these text-based games, right? You'd play them on your PC. It would be like, do you want to go here? You type yes or no, and then it goes down that path. And there's nothing visually really going on. It's just text. It's like a book, like an interactive book. But that was early video games. That's what they were. Zork and Return to Zork, when those games came out again later on the floppy disk, this is way back in the early PC gaming days, were complete remakes of the original Zork.
So
remakes.
What you're telling me is that games like Resident Evil that played the same weren't a remake based off of your definition. Games like Metal Gear weren't a remake based off of your definition. But Zork,
without more
Zork
knowledge of those versions, I would say that they're
Zork is the remake. Resident Evil on the GameCube is not enough of a remake because it has similar aspects to the original. Twilight or Twin Snakes is not a remake because it plays like there's not enough.
Remake the thing from the 50s.
Remaking the gameplay, so it's not a remake. But Zork, text-based to non-text based.
It was rebuilt from the ground up.
Everything that I think, and look, in my definition, then it would fit my definition of a remake. But your definition,
if you knew about that game,
it was
one of my earliest gaming experiences.
Your definition, stuff that we had that were clearly remakes: Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver, Resident Evil, Twin Snakes. All these games clearly are not remakes because we don't know if they are them because we can't peer into code. We can't do stuff like that.
I can't tell you because I don't have the experience with those games to know how much different the original and the new one.
Okay, well, I mean, I have experience with them. These are games that we've always seen, that were definitely remakes. So,
and maybe this fits my definition of a remake too, and I just don't know.
Why can't you look at the game and tell us your definition?
Because I don't base it on visuals alone. You're such a visual-oriented thing. If I go watch a YouTube video on an original like Metal Gear, and then I Twin Snakes or Solid or whatever the remake, I'm just going to look at it and all I want to see is a visual perspective. I'm not going to know the inner workings and the mechanical differences or anything that's different about the games other than this game looks better than this game.
Your
Like
definition,
just
like I
looking
said,
from the outside in, you're not. It doesn't give you all the knowledge. Like
okay,
if someone
because like I
just
said,
watches Xenoblade Chronicles.
your fundamental opinion is in order for this to be a remake, they have to completely remake the game in terms of gameplay. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
That.
it's got to be remade from the ground up.
So back to full circle, Shadow of the Colossus, even though it's clearly a remake and everyone said it was a remake,
And maybe it was made from the ground up.
It's not a remake based off of your definition. So Shadow of the Colossus, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, all these games that were clearly labeled as remakes, all of a sudden
and they might be remakes
so
if they were rebuilt from the ground. I'm saying that I don't have the knowledge to know if the remakes are. If they were rebuilt from the ground up, then they.
Let's just say that they were built from the ground up, but they play exactly the same. Developer made.
Well, if they're rebuilt from the ground up, that's a remake. If they're rebuilt from the ground up, that's a remake.
It plays exactly the same.
But it's still a remake. It's rebuilt from the ground up. That's literally my only definition. Is that it's rebuilt from the.
It's rebuilt from the ground up, but you literally just said remakes have to completely change the mechanics in terms of gameplay.
They don't have to completely change it. They need to create. When you remake something from the ground up, when you play, be honest with me. When you play Spyro Reignited and you go back and play the older Spyro games, does it feel exactly the same when you're playing?
Nate, no.
What? I literally said this whole time that remakes are built from the ground up.
Change enough with the gameplay in order for it to be a remake. Now you're saying if they remake the game completely and it's exactly the same, if they remade it from the ground up, it's a remake? We can't peer into code to know this type of stuff, man.
But we can. Nate, just because you don't do it doesn't mean you can't.
Okay, I think I'm gonna be done here because I don't like that.
Okay.
Nate, I don't like that.
That's okay. I still don't like your stance in the EA debate.
I don't like your stance on that, sir. Because you literally just said a bit ago that games have to play fundamentally different for them to be remakes. And that's why you mentioned Pokemon, you mentioned Final Fantasy, you mentioned Resident Evil, and now you're saying a game can be completely remade to play the same, but if it's from the ground up. Even though, what's the point of remaking a game from the ground up if
it wouldn't
exactly the same?
It wouldn't be exactly the same. That's the problem.
But what if they wanted? I'm saying hypothetically, what if they wanted to make it exactly the same as the game?
But you could say hypothetically, but where's the actual example that someone's actually done?
Would be my example.
And I don't know if it
would be my those games play exactly so close to how they played on the original. Spyro plays so close. There's some things here and there, frame rate, whatever the case is, but those games are very similar.
I think was
very similar. We've seen it.
Old memories of Spyro.
Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes has some extra things that they added in. There's a first-person mode that you can shoot and stuff like that, but the gameplay is very similar to what it was. There's been many games that were very similar to what they were, with very small changes that would not, by your definition, say that it's completely different. Because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some small changes in the gameplay in Xenoblade that makes it better or whatnot. Now we're getting subjective in terms of how much they change or whatever the case is. But now you're saying, well, it can be the exact same thing, but made from the ground up, but it's the same game? That's not a remake based on what you just said. Because when we talked about the whole movie thing, you said, well, what if I remake
it's remade from the ground up.
It's made from the ground up.
Yeah.
Okay, but you said earlier that the gameplay has to change.
Well, the gameplay would fundamentally change if it's remade from the ground up. There'd be little changes.
That's not true because there's been games where the gameplay doesn't fundamentally change and it can be made from the ground up.
But it might not have been made from the ground up then.
Okay, but we can clearly see that it was made from the ground up.
Like as an example, like Crash. Based on what I've seen of old gameplay videos and the new, I don't even know what they call it, if they call it remake or remaster, but
they call it a remake.
They call it a remake. So based on what I've seen, is it basically just not just looks like the same game in HD because that's just a visual improvement. It looks like it plays the same. Yeah, and if it's playing exactly the same, to me, they probably went to the original code base, imported it in their new engine, and then built on top of it.
We don't know that, and they haven't stated that, and I don't think anybody else has stated that. And we've had other games that clearly aren't ported from the original code base. That clearly they've made quite a number of changes because we can only tell.
So the frustrating thing,
the frustrating thing is that you're trying to talk about it from a developer
because I know some things,
but everybody else can look at it and say, well, it clearly looks a lot different. You know, it clearly looks way different than what it was. So it's enough for me to say, yo, this game is remade when they're remaking a bunch of things. And you're looking at, well, I don't know the code.
The game you brought up, the frustrating part for me, and this just sucks. Being in the I guess a perk and a negative of being in the position I am is that I've actually had conversations with developers on some of the games you've brought up where they mentioned, because I asked them if this is how it works in the AAA space, because I've never developed on a AAA game, and if this works on a game you're porting or if you're remastering or remaking, and they have told me things about copying code and porting the code base in on specific games you have brought up that you consider remakes. I just can't talk about it. Okay. Because I'm not supposed to talk. I don't want people getting in trouble. But that's not here nor there. You can actually find for yourself if you really, really want to. You just put the game on your PC and you can go through the code.
Okay.
But
well, I mean that's okay. So basically, based off of your definition, a developer can remake a game, can make it play exactly like it was before, and it be a remake. But you said that even though you said earlier that they have to change the gameplay in order for it to be that. You did the say gameplay. That, though. You did.
Yeah, but the gameplay wouldn't be exactly the same if they're recoded. Because it wouldn't. It wouldn't. Why wouldn't things don't work the same.
Pokemon
things don't work
the
same.
Soldiers like that. That game is remade. Everyone knows that it's a remake, but okay, that's fine. But the next thing that you're gonna say is, oh well, we don't know if it is. We can't go into code, and that's why I say it's silly. It's silly that
can go into code. But your whole argument you can't go into code is just false. Just because you don't do it or know how to do it doesn't mean you.
So that, I mean, basically, so all these games that we're talking about weren't remakes. Developers have been tricking us for 20 years, 30 years. We've been tricked
to sell games,
even though visually we can.
Because remakes do better than remasters.
Because
they do, and even in movies and music, remakes make more money than remastering something. That's just what happens.
Okay, well, Nate, here's the problem that I have.
Why do you think Spider-Man and Batman and all these things have been rebooted?
The problem that I have is that, like I said, for all these years we've had remakes. I'm not gonna sit here and act like something isn't a remake because we can't go into the code and look and we don't know that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I can sit here and say, well, maybe let me question if this is even a remake. You look at Metal Gear Solid on the PS1.
Well, consumers aren't meant to question anything. You look at Metal Gear Solid
Twin Snakes, and I'm gonna sit here and question whether this game is a remake or not.
If we're honest with ourselves, consumers.
But are you gonna do that? You're going to question whether Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes is a remake. Are you really gonna do that? I don't
have enough knowledge to question it, but if I had the knowledge, I would.
Then this discussion.
You're asking me about a game I don't have any knowledge of. What do you want?
Look at it. look at the game.
So you want me just to quick look up a couple screenshots and be like,
look up the PS1 version versus the GameCube. Look up Resident Evil 1 on the PS1. Look up Resident Evil on the GameCube and tell me if this is a remake or not.
Resident Evil 1 PS1. I don't know if I can find comparable screenshots, but let's see.
Look at the game.
All right, so there's one there from PS1. Then Resident.
You really have people thinking that we should question whether these games are remakes or not because of code?
GameCube.
Come on, man.
Because that's how it works in every other medium. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, gaming's different.
So okay, here's a comparison. Oh, that's PlayStation.
Man, we really out here questioning whether Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes is a remake or not, based off of this
I'm looking at. Here's the thing, you tell me just to look at it, and and this is where I said how games makes a. I'm looking at a screenshot of Resident Evil 1 on GameCube. I'm looking at a screenshot of it on PlayStation. The only thing that looks different is it's just prettier on GameCube. It's a lot prettier on GameCube. All
right, Nate. This was a good discussion. This is a good discussion. And we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm gonna get to my I guess you have donations. I guess you can keep going with your stream and get those donations. I'll read off my donations and talk to my audience about this stuff. But Nate, thanks for coming on. I do appreciate that, man. I really do appreciate you being a good sport and coming on. This was a much better debate in terms of people that we didn't get all crazy on each other. So I like that.
Yeah, we're all good. We're all good. And we came into it knowing that honestly the turn that much.
Okay. All right. So thanks for having me on, Nate. I'm gonna just talk to my audience and then so I'll see you again at some point.
Yep. See ya.
All right, see ya. Okay. Nate brought up some good stuff. Let me start with the good. Nate brought up some good stuff. There's some stuff that he brought up I think the Wind Waker point definitely. I need to research more on that one, but it wasn't completely remade models and things like that because he was using. But I mean, that's definitely a point that he brought up. The whole movie thing. I mean, it is what it is with the movie thing. You know, remakes are different. But I mean, goodness gracious, bruh. Goodness gracious, bruh. We out here questioning. We out here questioning whether Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes is a remake or not. When the developers said it's a remake, when the gamers' eyes said it was a remake, when everyone said it was a remake, we out here questioning whether Resident Evil 1 from the PS1 to the GameCube is a port or a remaster. When it's clearly remade models, clearly remade visuals, clearly remade lighting, clearly new engine. I can't. This new definition of remake is garbage. Garbage. It took me a while to get to it. At first we were kind of going back and forth, but when I asked him to name a game, this man brought up Zork. That was my favorite part. This man said, that's when I think I just threw in the towel at that point. It's like, yo, we got the Zork. The Zork is loose in the chat, man. Like the Zork is loose. Let me go over some donations that we had. We had a number of donations. Mac Mega, oh no, not Mac Mega. Christian donated $1 and says, Prime, a game like Xenoblade Definitive Edition is next to impossible to port over. The game cannot port over, so therefore the game is remake. I can give you many examples from the code to graphic updates. Trust me, I did this every day, which I was trying to tell him, but he is insisting. You know, Blue Bolt donated $2 and says, have fun and enjoy. Mana Entertainment donated $2 and says, if it reuses code, why isn't PS4 be compatible with the PS2? Good point. Andre Wine donated $10. Says, you're both wrong. It's not a remake or remade. It's clearly the title of the game. It's Definitive Edition. Learn to read. Okay. Thank you for the 10. J2 Blue says, donated 5 and says, does Nate consider Trials of Mana a remake or remaster? I should have asked him that. I guess he would probably consider that a remake because there's significant combat changes in that game that weren't in the original. So I would think that he would think that was a remake, although there's a lot of stuff that's similar. Your boy Roy donated $5 and says, whose man is this? Heart Gold Soul Silver, is it a remake? LOL. Yeah, I know, man. Let's see here. Will Bowden donated $2 says 100% a remake. OJ is right, it's a new engine. Joe Munger says, you are wrong on this one. OJ donated $1.99. Brian L. Zakam donated $1.99. Says Mario 64 DS was a remake of the N64 game. Was it? I don't know about that. Mac Mega donated $2. Says, I'd argue that Super Mario All-Stars is a remake of the OG Mario games. Upgraded graphics, remade tracks, glitches fixed, and some quality of life improvements as well. That's true. Juice Man Vaughn donated $2 and says Zork LMAO. Yeah, this man brought out the Zork on me, bro. I'm dumbfounded. This man got the Zork on me. Thank you for the donations though, guys. I appreciate that. What are you guys' take on this, man? What are you guys' thoughts? I'll take questions for a bit and then I gotta get some editing done. This is very, very, very interesting, man. I think we kind of went back and forth with the wall, but I think we made some headway once we got to the the whole part about like, yo, name a remake, bruh. Based off of your definition, this man literally said we don't know if there's remakes or not. Like, bruh. We've been tricked for 20, 30 years. Developers have been covering wool over eyes. They've been porting games that are literally the same, you know what I'm saying? And they've been calling them remakes, even though they remake things in the game. I can clearly see that they're remaking things. My eyes don't deceive me. But since it plays the same code that I don't even know, because I'm not a developer, code is the same. Usually you can tell the code, like if the code is ported, you can clearly tell that a code is ported. But, you know, apparently you can't these days, you know, apparently you can't. Like, we can tell what a remaster is. I can tell what a remaster is. I can tell what a remake is. I know the difference between the two. It's very clear to see when a game is a remaster or a game is a remake, in my opinion. But, you know, I guess we can't. Tim W says, you should have asked him about Link's Awakening. I did bring up Link's Awakening. He didn't respond to Link's Awakening. In terms of it, but I did. If you go back and watch the stream, I did bring up Link's Awakening. Thank you for the $4 donations total though, but I did bring up Link's Awakening. Scotty Fresh says, yo, OJ, what's good? It's about 5 a.m. over here. My thoughts are that it's a definitive edition. You know what? That's good thoughts. According to Nate, all of gaming history remakes are a recent thing. Well, okay. Hold up here, guys. Oh, snap. You know what? It's not going to let me. Here's the problem, guys. In this, it's not gonna let me go into a video because Discord was using my camera. So it's not gonna let me go into a video at any point, you know? So I don't know what I'm gonna do in terms of video. You guys can still hear me, but Discord will boot you out after a while, you know, so you guys just get to see my backdrop. So sorry about that. You guys want me to put up an image of something? I don't know. My camera's not gonna work on here because Discord's already using it. Well, let me check though. Let me see. No, I don't think, yeah, my camera's not gonna work at all. Like if I go to any of my settings, my camera doesn't work because Discord's still using it. I mean, I can head back into a room by myself, but it'll kick me out. See, like, yeah, it'll kick me out after a while. So it'll kick me out after a while. If so, like, look, what I can do is I can like start a voice call and like I can like get back into and just like do this. Wait, don't answer. Hold up. What I can do is I can actually no, I can't do anything. I can't do anything. I'm just gonna have to have this backdrop, guys. So we're just gonna have to have this over here. What the heck am I doing? Discord essence. Let's see here. Damn, OJ, you just doxed 40 people. No, I didn't. I didn't dox anybody. What are you talking about? Go to test camera. I don't think you can go to test camera. If one application is doing, you have to exit out and then go back in. So yeah. But no, I didn't dox anybody. What are you talking about? You can do voice call real quick, then leave your cam off and it sizes up. I don't think you can. Test in Discord. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, so let me check. Let me see. Wait a minute. Yeah, you're right, Discord. But Discord's it's not coming up for me though now. Yeah, Discord is not, it's not coming up for me at all. It's like, yeah, Discord, there's no Discord popping up. Let me see something real quick. Oh, hold up, here we go. All right, so yeah, let me go to test camera real quick. User settings, voice and video, test video. Okay. Yeah, but then how do we make it big? We can't make it big though. It just goes to the setting. Look, it just goes like that. It's just super small. I guess I can zoom in. So like, no, I can't even zoom in. Oh yeah, actually wait, I can. So I mean, I can zoom in, but I mean, it's just like this. You guys want it? You guys want it like this? Y'all want it like this? I mean, I guess we can do this. I guess we can do this. Y'all all right with that? Yeah, you have to, yeah. Better than nothing. Okay. So there, there you go. It's better than nothing. Here, let me see if I can. No, that's all it's gonna zoom, boys. I don't care either way, but in my opinion, Remake is a different game. There's no objective reason to go back to the original if it's original if it's a remaster. It's a different game. Then wouldn't that be a new game then? If you're remaking a game, you're saying it's a different game. If it's a different game, then why not it just be a new game? What if the developer wants to keep the same gameplay feel but remake it for a new audience? Remake new graphics, remake new UI, remake new visuals, like way better, far improved, not just 50% or not just somewhat percentage, but actually remake the models and make them look drastically better, but keep the same core gameplay that people really loved, you know, with better tweaks and things like that. Look, I'm not trying to sit there and say that this is a full-blown remake Xenoblade. It's a full-blown remake and everything is completely remade from the ground up because obviously it's not with the animations and all that. I just think that the definition of remake doesn't mean it has to be like Final Fantasy VII, you know, which is what Nate was getting to, which he then walked back on because he said that gameplay has to change significantly. There needs to be completely different. But then he also said that, well, if a developer wants to remake a game and make it from the ground up, but it can be the exact same as it was, that's also a remake, even though he said, oh, but developers aren't going to do that. But that's not the point. You know what I'm saying? The point is that you said that it has to change, but it doesn't have to change, you know, because you said developers wouldn't do that. But what if they wanted to? We've had games that are very similar to what they were originally with little tweaks here and there. And that's how we got to Resident Evil when he said, all right, Resident Evil looks the same. And I'm like, okay, bro, I'm good. You know, because then he essentially called Resident Evil on the GameCube a port, or he called it a HD, he called it a remaster, which it's a remake of the original Resident Evil. Um, So I mean that was the issue that I had, like the disrespect to Resident Evil, the disrespect to Metal Gear Solid, the disrespect to all these games that we had beforehand that were literally remakes, that were marketed as remakes, that were remakes that we can clearly see as a remake, and then now all of a sudden it's no longer a remake because of this 2019 this 2018 2019 definition because of Pokemon Let's Go and recent stuff. I find that ridiculous. I find that ridiculous. Let's see here. And he said his definition was clear cut. Not really. No, not really. Remake or remaster. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3DS. I mean, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3DS. I mean, from what I understand with that game, there's definitely the source code was ported over and they just basically built on top of it models. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I don't see necessarily a big enough difference in terms of things, but I mean, it's one of those tweener games, which I said like with Xenoblade, you know, I think there's a pretty clear definition to me that there's enough changed. I'm looking at Twilight or Ocarina of Time, and I say that yo, there's a lot changed, but there's a lot that looks the same, you know, in terms of models and things like that. But then again, it might be the difference in terms of power between the N64 and the 3DS. Not really sure. So it is. So does the code need to be 10% or 50% remade to be a remake? That's what I was saying. Like we can't peer into these codes and see how much. You know, we can look at a code of a game and then like you can't just. I don't think you can just port a code wholesale over, like import it, and then you're good to go. If you have to change things up if you're making a remake. If you're changing up animation, facial animations and things like that, it's not going to be the exact same thing. From my limited knowledge of that, it's not going to be the exact same thing. It's not going to be like a Devil May Cry, you know, DMC Devil May Cry, where the game is literally the same in almost animations. Everything is the exact same thing throughout UI text. Everything is just the same. That's more of a remaster. Yes, you can do some more work like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD, but originally the game pretty much looks the same. Originally it looks the same, whereas Xenoblade literally looks completely different, you know, in terms of what they're originally trying to do. So to me, it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear, but apparently it's not clear enough based on my definition. So, let's see. So he's wrong about movies. Lion King 1 is a remake with the original. Same story, same plot, same setting, same characters. Only difference they remade the visuals remake. Yeah, but he says in the movie sense, that's a remaster, not a remake. You know? So once again, he's trying to take that definition and apply it to gaming, which in my opinion, no, they remade Lion King. But their definition is that it has to be completely different, which is what he was trying to get at from the beginning, which changed because he said it can be the same thing with the same code, you know what I'm saying? But if they remake it completely from the ground up, you know, but it's the exact same thing, then it's a remake. But then again, what was the point of saying that it needs to be played differently? Because he went on about it being different. But this whole movie thing, I think it's silly. And that's what I tried to say. I was like, well, what if they completely remake the visuals completely different? They remade the movie. Like, if you want to talk about remaster or remake, then that's just semantics at this point, right? Like, to me, if you're using a bunch of new things to remake a movie, even if it's exactly the same as the previous movie, you remade the movie. You remade it. It's just Lion King is a completely different animation, completely different CG, whatever the case is, completely different. But I guess that's a remaster, right? They didn't change enough, and it literally is exactly like in terms of everything, in terms of the plot, a lot of the stuff. Obviously, they new voices for certain characters, but they try to get them to make the same. But like, I don't like bringing in the movie thing because the movie thing is weird. The movie thing is not the same as the gaming industry, you know. So that's my issue. Let's see. And the word reboot needs to be in the discussion. I brought that up. I said, like, I brought up Tomb Raider. You know, I brought up some of those other things, which, like I said, I think Nate has he had a point. Like, I'm not gonna sit there and just completely discredit him. And like I said, he was a good sport about it. We were much better. I think it was a good debate. It was very good, very fun, very entertaining for many people to watch, in my opinion. You know, like when people say it's a waste of time, it's not, because people show up and watch, you know, whether we're idiots or we don't know what we're talking about. Okay, that's fine. But at the same time, people watch this more than they watch my OJ Live. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got numbers that was near the PE podcast. So, I mean, like, it's still a discussion worth having, you know, and I think I even saw Commonwealth Realm pop his head in here and say, oh my gosh, what have I started? You know what I'm saying? Which, like I said, it is what it is. It's a good discussion to have. I think there's two variations of remaster. One, graphical overhaul. Two is a graphical enhancement. Twilight Princess or Final Fantasy VIII Remaster versus Ocarina of Time 3D. See, Final Fantasy VIII, that game was remade because they lost the source code. Twilight Princess, that game was literally remastered because they took the code from what they had and they just basically made it looks the same. there's not tons of changes there, you know. So yeah, that's the thing. That's my take on it. Um, I wish they would have just titled it Xenoblade Remake instead of Remaster. Just confusing. It's really not, because it is and it isn't. It's confusing to people who want to sit here and try to downplay the game. Then yeah, it's confusing to them. But it should and this is what I think, Dev. This is what I think. I think that somebody's opinion should not be tilted based off of what they call it. It should not be tilted based off of what they call it. It should be based how the game is. Because I can guarantee you, that's what I told him. I was like, I can guarantee you if this game was called Remake, you probably wouldn't question it. But the fact that it's definitive edition has you questioning things. Same thing goes with lots of like Resident Evil, right? Or Twin Snakes. You know, if these were called Remake, would he really be questioning them? I don't think so. And if you are, then you're using it based off of 2018 Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and Final Fantasy VII and Resident. You're using that to make your opinion. Like that's ridiculous. That means you're like I said, you're revisionist history. What we called it and what people were calling it, what it was back then. It's not that, because I think this. And that's what I said, revisionist history. That's what I said, Zoomer logic. No, what you said was wrong, because this is the new thing, and the new thing is better than what you called it, and they're doing more, so therefore, since they're doing more, and I think it's different enough, this is the new definition, and the old definitions, those might not even have been ports, or those might not even have been remakes, because I don't think based on my new definition, or what I think, and I didn't play those games back then, these games might not be remakes. And that's what I'm like, how are you gonna sit here and revise something based off of what's happening now and based off of Zork? You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you gonna sit here and revisionist everything? That's ridiculous. That's absolutely insane. It's a slap in the face to the developers that busted their butt on that remake, and it's a slap in the face to gamers out there that literally lived through this. Like, you're really gonna sit here and tell me that these games aren't remakes because it doesn't fit your new definition? And that's Zoomer logic. I don't know anything else but to think that's Zoom. That's why I brought it up one time. I'm joking, but that is definitely Zoomer logic. When people defend Fortnite, I think Fortnite's the best because Fortnite does this and games back then didn't do this. It's like, this is Zoomer. Like, you're just bringing up a new style of gameplay or whatever, which is Battle Royale, which we didn't really have back then, and saying it's the best because of this. Bro, there's different styles, there's different definitions, there's different ways to classify things. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is ridiculous. Like I bet many will still say Smash Bros. Ultimate is a Wii U port. I mean, that's a little bit of a different case, but it is what it is. It's a text-based adventure game, Zork. Yeah, Nate did, and then tried to say he doesn't like how people are going back and forth if it's a remake or remaster. But the problem is some use the term to downplay it. That's what I'm saying. Some do use the term to downplay it. I mean, Commonwealth did use the term to downplay it. He did. And people are using the term to downplay it. Many other Nintendo content creators have also done that as well, which is fine. You have an opinion, but like I said, I don't get salty when people do that. I simply just give people my opinion. And I don't have a problem talking about it. Like, it's not a big deal. Like I said, nobody ripped each other's throats off. Nobody did anything. And it was great content for people to watch. People can call us whatever they want to call us, but it's content. And hundreds of people are watching. Believe me, it's hard to get even 50 people to watch you stream when you're starting out. Getting 200 or 300 people watching you on a topic, that's good. That's not a bad thing. Even those people that get like 20,000, 30,000, whatever the case is, if you can get up to 50, 100 people watching you, you're doing something right. You're doing something right if you can get people to spend their time watching you. So, Zoomer logic, your remakes are canceled. Pretty much, that's what he was saying. And then he used that, well, I haven't seen enough of it. And then when he looked it up, it was like, oh, well, all they did was the graphics look better. So it's the same. I'm like, all right, I'm done. You know? OJ, 3D games are only like 20 years old. I'm 35 years old. HD remasters just started last generation. Remakes are a new thing for the most part. They're not a new thing for the most part, Joe Munger. That's not true. That is not true at all, because Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes happened in the early 2000s. We had that remake. We've had remakes of other games as well. For example, what else? Resident Evil. That was in the early 2000s. They didn't just start with the HD era or seventh or last generation. That's not true. Remakes have been happening for a while now. We've had other Pokemon Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Those have been remakes as well. Yeah, we've had Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy has been remade on the DS. We had those remade as well, in terms of Square Enix remaking those games with completely new visuals. Even though the gameplay was very similar, there's been multiple times that we've had games that are remade before the last generation, which you would say that would be the 7th generation. That's not true, Joe. That's not true. So no, we've had remakes for a while now. You said for the most part, but that's not what you said. Joe, you said calling it. You said you literally just said it started last generation. That's not true. We've been having remakes for a while now. I mean, I can, now that I'm not in debate mode, I can pull up a Google. You want me to pull up a Google list? So yeah, we have the Final Fantasy games, which are on the DS. Um, and it's so funny. It's like best remade games, and it's so funny. I mean, I'm looking up different stuff here from what people have put. You know, um, So, video game remakes. A video game remake closely adapted from an earlier title, usually for the purpose of modernizing a game for newer hardware and contemporary audiences. Typically, a remake of such game software shares essentially the same title, fundamental gameplay, concepts, and core story elements of the original game. Remakes are often made by the original developer, or not sometimes, or copyright holder, sometimes by the fan community. It's created with community. Video game remakes are sometimes called fan game. You've seen as part of retro game phenomena. So, I mean, like, they shut off Pokemon Red and Blue, and then Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf, Leaf Green and all that stuff like that. So, I mean, there's definitely been remakes that have been around for a long time, early 2000s and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily a new thing. I mean, we're going on, 17 plus years, 20 years for remakes for certain stuff. Resident Evil was a very early remake on the GameCube. Let's see. Pac-Man has been remade for 40 years. There are multiple versions of Pac-Man being remade. That's true. In my opinion, if you look at the developer intention, remakes make subjective changes, remasters make objective changes. If there are objective reasons to still play the original, it's a remake. Your definition is weird as hell. Usually what a remaster is, a developer says, hey, we want to put this game on a new system. They take the code, they plop it in there. It looks literally the same. It's upscaled to HD a bit. And then they say, here you go, Final Fantasy 10/10-2. That's what they did there. It looks like the PS2 game, but it's just modernized in terms of resolution, but the gameplay is exactly the same. For the most part, the game's exactly the same. That's usually what a remaster is. Whereas if you look at a game like Final Fantasy 7 Remake, or if you look at a game like even a game like Spyro, or you look at games like that, looks completely different from what they did before. They've modernized some things, obviously completely changed some things, or Spyro changed similar but changed a couple things here and there. But I don't know about your definition, bro. Let's see here. I don't know. Even on MP Stream now, some say both of you made good points. Yeah, right. Well, it's MP Stream, so of course he's gonna have people that that say that he made good points. I would say that he probably made maybe one good point, one or two good points. I think the point with Wind Waker, I need to know more of the development of that game, and definitely there's some sketchiness there, right? Or even like Ocarina of Time, definitely some sketchiness. But I think it's very clear when you look at certain games that you can clearly tell whether this is more effort's been put in terms of a remake or not. Not a developer struggling with HD. So that's what he tried to say, that it took as much effort or as much time because it was 2 years. But at the same time, they were struggling with HD development. That's the reason why it took longer than it did. If they weren't struggling with HD development, then it wouldn't have taken as long as it did take them. But they were struggling because Nintendo was behind. Monolith Soft wasn't behind on HD development. They had already been making HD games. They had multiple HD games under their belt. They had multiple big games under their belt. They had worked on HD. So he was trying to make that relation to, well, it's like, hey, well, they're struggling too. It takes a lot of effort and stuff, but that's only because they were struggling, because they were behind. Monolith Soft was not struggling with anything. It took them that long to make this game because there's a lot of work that needs to be done to adapt the game from the Wii to the Nintendo Switch. It's not something that was easily done. It wasn't because they were struggling. It was because it took time to actually remake things. Legend of Zelda, it took as long as it did because they were struggling, which I said that. So let's see here. I asked Nate though if he could link with Link's Awakening and a remake, and he said no because Link moved the same way he did on the Game Boy. That's what I'm saying. Like his definition, and I brought that up too. His definition is bad because that's not the definition of a remake. You know what I'm saying? Oh, well, if it moves the same, or if it plays the same, then it's not a remake. No, it can play the same. That's fine. It's fine. It can play the same and be a remake. His definition is just weird as heck. It is. He also did not move like he does in the original. There's some slight changes. It has a general feel, I guess. Like obviously you could move a bit better, but just by looking at it, it looks that way. But yeah, it's not the exact same. No, it's not. But he hasn't played it enough. Let's just call it a soft remake. I mean, we can just call it a remake if you want. I mean, We can just call it that. I mean, I guess you can. That gets into weird territory. Like I said, I clearly know what like Twilight Princess. That's clearly a remaster. You know what I'm saying? That's clearly one. Xenoblade clearly is different than Twilight Princess, and I think that's clear cut. There's no like, oh well, this did. Look at Twilight Princess. Look at Devil May Cry. Look at these games and how they look on their previous iterations, and then look at Xenoblade compared to its previous iteration. Like, I don't think we need to sit there and go for it, because we're not developers. We don't have to sit there and peer into code. Developers can take a code, put it on something, and completely change so many different things. It's something new. Like that's the thing. So I don't think that we need, because we're not developers and we're not going to be peering into code and finding out exactly what they used and what was changed, what was modified. We're not going to be doing all that. And when you put the definition that way, that's what makes it to where you sit there and question games and you say, well, I don't know if Resident Evil 1 was a remake, despite everybody at the time saying it was a remake. Now all of a sudden, because of this new definition, it's no longer a remake. Because of this new it's no longer a remake because of a new definition that people have made up. Like that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Let's see here. It is okay to question things, and it's also okay to disagree with things. You can question all that you want to question. That's fine. But at the same time, your eyes, there's nothing questioning about my eyes when I see it. I'm not going to sit here and look back at 20 years of gaming, since the early 2000s and disregard that and say, well, maybe it's not a remake based on a definition that was made up in 2018 on his logic. So we're going to sit here and re-question what happened because of a 2018 definition, because he didn't have a definition beforehand, and now he's made a definition because of new games, and now we're going to go back and say those weren't. That's why I say revisionist. It's not questioning. That's called revisionist history. That's not, and I'm just answering people. I'm talking to people here in the chat. I know we're kind of beating the dead horse, but I'm talking to people here in the chat. I'm trying to be, respectful and talk to people who disagree with me. But I call that revisionist history. When you sit there and say, when everybody considered something a remake or considered that, and now because of new games that have came out, not all of a sudden, well, maybe it's not a remake. No, it's just maybe the definition of remake has expanded. Why exclude it? Why exclude something that was something beforehand? Because something new came in. That's like saying, yo, look at these Hall of Famers that had these great numbers or whatever the case is. But no, they're no longer Hall of Famers because these new guys come in with way better numbers. No, they're still Hall of Famers. They still had good careers. They're still good. Just these new people came in and expanded on what it takes or what it is, It seems like Nate is confusing remakes for reboots. Maybe. No, you're good. It just seems like people are bringing up the same things. You're right. Remaster remake is the same thing. Apparently it's not, Rex. Apparently it's not. Technology changes things. Technology in terms of improving things, that's nothing to do with technology. You can by his definition, you could have completely changed the way a game is completely changed the way that a game is made mechanically with older technology. New technology isn't what makes Final Fantasy VII Remake play the way that it does. There's games that have action game where you're hitting people, ATB. That's not anything new. There's nothing new about that. Technology didn't change anything with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake could easily have been made, downgrade the graphics, still make them good, downgrade the graphics to PS3 level, and run around, downgrade the graphics to PS2 level, run around and slash Star Ocean. They could have took the Star Ocean is an action RPG where you run around and slash people. Or run around action RPG. There's no technology that didn't change anything with Final Fantasy VII Remake. All it did was make the graphics way better. The gameplay isn't anything done by technology. Not from my gameplay. Not from my gameplay. There's nothing that Final Fantasy VII Remake does gameplay wise that just completely. It's all graphical. It's all graphical with Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's possible on the newest technology. But gameplay wise, it has an ATB bar. You press a bunch of buttons and you're just slashing people. You're hitting people. Then you do magic with the ATB. That's not. We've had ATB forever. So nah. Trials of Mana couldn't be made on the Super Nintendo. If they wanted to make it like they wanted to make it, they could have easily. If they thought about those ideas, absolutely. They changed the camera and the perspective. That's graphical. That's graphical things. That's graphical. You know what I'm saying? Camera and stuff like that. Graphical. Maybe the engine, 3D. Obviously, Super Nintendo couldn't handle 3D graphics like that. But the fundamental gameplay of Trials of Mana, you can make it to where you jump on the Super Nintendo. You can make it to where you hit people in the air. You can make it to where you dodge roll. All the gameplay mechanics that they put into Trials of Mana, you could do that on the Super Nintendo. Wouldn't be as high quality, but you could still do it. So now I'm gonna have to disagree. Aron donated 5, says, bro, just give up. It's a remaster because reasons. Exactly. So no, I'm gonna have to disagree with that. The only thing that you couldn't do on the Super Nintendo was probably the camera view and all that. And obviously you can do the HD graphics, but gameplay wise, jumping, a roll where you dodge roll, strong attack and weak attack. If they thought about it, they probably could have put it in there. I don't know if that was anything like technologically that they couldn't do, you know? Games and movies are totally different. I tried to say that, but it's an action RPG. Now Final Fantasy VII, the story that makes it a reboot. Well, I guess a reboot, reimagining. Yeah, I mean, so by his definition, we have to wait until the game comes out to look at the code and determine if it's a remake. So no game can be marketed as a remake before releases. Well, we have to look at the code, or we have to see that it plays differently, right? Even though maybe they can port the code and maybe they change things up with the code. But yeah, basically what he's saying, that they have to, it has to be clearly obvious in terms of gameplay mechanics. That's what he first said. But then he also said that a developer can make a game play exactly like it was before and have no gameplay changes or very few gameplay changes, but that's also a remake, even though he was saying that it has to change. So he said two different things. At one point, he said that the game has to drastically change in terms of how the game is played and animations. But then he also said if a developer wants to remake a game and make it play exactly like it, but since it's from the ground up, that's also a remake, even though he clearly said, well, no, that wasn't beforehand. So he gave me two different things, one at the beginning and then one at the end. And then his logic was, well, because no developer would do that, but we've already gotten many games that do actually don't change the gameplay too much up from what it was. But then he said that those aren't remakes. He said those aren't remakes then. So revisionist history. Based on my new definition of what a remake is, because of modern gameplay, therefore all the stuff that we had before aren't remakes, those are remasters because of my definition, which is, that was his point. Apparently. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm pretty sure that was his point. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D, a remake? Nah, they just ported that. They just ported it over to the 3DS or to the new Nintendo 3DS. Nah. No one is going to use the same source code for 10 years on an old game. It's not going to age well for the most part. Well, that's what I was trying to say, that they build on top of it. It's not going to be the exact same thing, and he was saying, but that's what they do. They import it. It's the same thing. I'm like, no, they don't. And that's when he started getting, you don't know. You never ported. I'm like, bruh, I know enough to sit there and say that it's not the exact same thing and they're going to build on top of it. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe they want to retain certain things and change out other things. If you remake multiple things in a game, then it's a remake. If you don't, and you just port over the code and you adapt it to where it runs on the system that you're trying to run it on, and it looks literally the same or very similar, and there's not 3D models where there was 3D models, and you don't change it a bunch of stuff, then it's a remaster. They just up the quality. They made it sharper. It's dolphin versions of games. Twilight Princess HD, Wind Waker, games like that. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, remaster. Took the game, made it run at 1080p. They upped the resolution to native 1080p. Remaster. And then he tried to say that HD ports are different from remasters, which is so silly because that's the exact same thing. An HD port is a remaster. That is a remaster. You're taking the game and you're porting it. A remaster is a port. They port the code. A remaster, they take it and they make it better quality with HD. So then he tried to separate those two. So it's HD ports, remasters, and remakes, that's just ridiculous. So then there was that. Any game put on a phone is a remake, as a phone code is entirely different in every single way. I mean, maybe. Let's see. Do you see RE2 remake and FF7 remake as a reimagining? As I see personally, I see Xenoblade as remaking the more with more story. Okay, I can see that. So by definition, Spyro Reignited isn't a remake. Technically, yeah, by his definition, because the game is similar, but he says that he doesn't have enough information with it, so he doesn't know, So yeah. I wonder why it uses remaster as a broader term. I have not seen one remaster game that looks more beautiful. They're usually the same. Same goes to Commonwealth Logic too. I mean, it's fine. I think discussion's good. The discussion on it is fantastic. I'm a big fan of the discussion. I'm a big fan. I really am a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of the discussion. I think you guys are a big fan too. Some of you guys obviously don't care, didn't like it, but a lot of you guys did. A lot of you guys felt that it was pretty good. I think it can be like a staple. We should definitely bring in more people that maybe have a bit more knowledge on some of these past old games and stuff like that, and see what they gotta say. Maybe we bring in some more. We bring in some more when it comes down to it. But I'm down. I'm definitely down to bring in more people and kind of see what's going on here. So yeah. You just brought out some weirdos. Yeah. Some guy tagged me and was like, and made this point. He said that I'm putting too much credence into visuals, but that's how remakes always were. This is the zoomer logic and definition. Like, oh well, it has to completely remake everything within the game. No, visuals were part of the way. If it was remade, that's it. Remade with tweaks to make the gameplay better. That's what a remake was. They significantly improved, completely remade the models, completely remade textures, completely remade so many aspects of the game, and then they also did that. It's not giving too much credence to visuals. That's how it was. I'm not gonna sit here and change my definition because Final Fantasy VII Remake and Pokemon and games that came out today. That's ridiculous, and I'm not gonna sit here and let somebody say that Resident Evil and say that Resident Evil 1 is not a remake because they didn't do enough gameplay wise to change from it. Bruh, nah. No, I'm sorry. Y'all can have if you can't name a single game before 2018 that was a remake because you don't know, but Zork, and then you're gonna sit and talk about Wind Waker HD. Oh well, that's a knockout kick. Ain't nobody KO nothing. Ain't nobody KO anything. I'm sorry. That's you're gonna just ignore everything. Nah, I'm good, bro. You can't name a single a single game. I'm good on that one, bro. I'm good on that. All right, let's see some more comments here. If you want to talk about programming, he can tell you that Nate's definition didn't make a lot of sense from a dev standpoint. Madden still uses the same code from 1996. Yeah. What's your definition of a remaster? Remasters, they usually take the same code, they plop it into whatever they're gonna do, adapt it real quick for the system. Usually they upgrade the visual, or the resolution is usually upgraded. The visuals aren't upgraded too much. Sometimes they might retexture things, little small changes here and there, but for the most part, it looks the same as the previous game. And then they just kind of, it might run a little bit better. Then they just kind of throw it out there. Examples: Tokyo Mirage Sessions Remaster runs in higher resolution. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Those are all remastered games. Devil May Cry, like Devil May Cry 1, 2 on the Switch. Devil May Cry 3, a little bit of enhanced one because they did add some new stuff, but it generally looks the same as it did on the PS3, which looks the same as it did on the PS2, just shiny looking. So those are my definitions of remaster. Not much of a visual difference at all. It's the same source code for the most part. Not really changing too much in it. Yeah, they added some things here and there, but not really much that they've done. That's why you don't bring opinions to the facts are required. Yeah. Let's see here. That dude, chronology is a freaking odd. How can you put a Ferrari? How can you put a Ferrari shell on a Corolla? Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about, bro. Well, he believes that. Yeah. Let's see here. He believes that what's it called? That gameplay needs to change significantly. But then Nate also said that gameplay doesn't. That if the game is just remade visually, that it can be the exact same as the game. Gameplay wise can be the exact same. Visually can be greatly upgraded, but the gameplay is the exact same. But if it's remade from the ground up, which no code at all from the original game, then that means it's a remake. But he doesn't know enough about games in terms of the source code or anything like that to confirm whether it's a remake or not. So even by going by that definition, we can't tell, you know? Let's see. Overall, decent debate. I don't think Nate understood what the point was making, bringing movies and coding into discussion. Yeah, I don't know, bro. His logic behind the base code made no sense. Wouldn't all Pokemon games be reimagining from Gen 1 logic since the formula never drastically changed between each entry? Yeah, he called Pokemon Soul Silver and Heart Gold. He called those remasters, and then he called Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. He called those a remake because you can throw a Pokeball at a screen, you know. And even though the same base gameplay is the same, you can throw a Pokeball at a screen. And that's what makes it a remake because of that. So yeah, not the visuals or not anything like that. So yeah. OJ, this stream is pretty hilarious. Nate had me dying with his logic. What a remake and a remaster is. Yeah. Well, I'm curious about what games Nate worked on though. I might try them out. Well, he didn't want to talk about some of the stuff, but it is what it is. Yeah, I personally think that, Wind Waker looks drastically like the same. Obviously, they made some, like, the lighting mainly looks different in terms of like the lighting, but the models generally look the same. They didn't remake the whole thing 50% or over 50%. We don't know how much of that was pretty much the same thing or not. They just took the same base model and they just made it look. They obviously textured it a little bit better and stuff like that. It looks like Xenoblade. They completely remodeled things. That's why I use my eyes. I'm not a developer. I'm not gonna sit there and try to peer into code and say this is a completely new code compared to this code, or they use 50% of this code or 75% of it. Like that's ridiculous. Just use your eyes. Like Twilight Princess HD looks like the Wii game, just sharper. Wind Waker looks like the Wii. It looks like the GameCube. Looks like the GameCube game, just sharper, better lighting, stuff like that. Resident Evil 3 does not look like the Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 2 does not look like Resident Evil 2. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition looks a lot better, So that's just kind of like my thing. But I don't know. Like I said, it was a good discussion. Wind Waker HD is a remaster. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is a remake. Final 7 is a reimagining. PlayerEssence, all it takes is using your eyes. That's what I was trying to say. That use your eyes, But apparently you can't use your eyes these days. You can't. You got to peer into code. You got to know code. You got to do all this other stuff. So. Yeah, everyone seemed to like it though. Carl said I have to do more of these. I think Double D said I have to do more. So at this point, man, I'd rather say that Final Fantasy is a hack and slash than sit here and go into this new depth. You want to know what makes me look? Listen. Compared to this whole hack and slash thing, You know what? Hey, look, yo, call it a hack and slash. That's fine. But calling Resident Evil 1 not a remake and questioning whether that game is a remake or not based off of 2018 or 2019 or Final Fantasy VII logic and all that, bruh, call it a hack and slash. Because I'll tell you which one that's worse. I'll tell you that. Like, the disrespect of these games that came before that literally set the blueprint and the template for upgrading and taking a game and making it better, sitting there and disrespecting them and saying that they're lesser of what they are and only putting it toward, like, bruh, I'll call it a hack and slash. Let's see. Let's debate why DS is better than the 3DS. I think that's a good debate. That's a good debate. DS has way more games. So if you look at the DS has like 5 bajillion more games than the 3DS. You just got, I mean, like, third-party support, DS crushes the 3DS. But you can sit here and say that the 3DS can play everything the DS can play. So the 3DS is better. So you can also do that. Let's see here. Dawson says, I've missed these discussions. Hope you'll do more. Might bring up some insight on the industry. Yeah, absolutely. Was the Wii version of Pikmin 1 into a remake of the GameCube version? No, that was a remaster. They literally took the same game. And maybe this would have been a good thing to, oh, it plays differently, right? You play it differently. Mechanically, it's the same, but you play it differently. But no, those were remasters. They literally looked exactly the same. They just bolted on motion controls to all. Those were like the new play controls. They were the exact same game. They looked the same. Dude, the resolution was even the same, I think. Everything was the same, but they bolted on Wii motion controls with those. So no, they're exactly the same games. Exactly the same games. How does the art style in original Xenoblade Chronicles 1 for Wii compare to Xenoblade Chronicles X? The art style? I think that it's an evolution of what they were trying to do, but obviously it's much cleaner on Xenoblade Chronicles X. Let's port the GameCube game, but not even give the option of the standard control scheme. That's pretty much what Nintendo did during that era. Pretty much. I think at the end of the day, people are going to have their opinions, though. People are going to have their opinions. And at the end of the day, people who think one way, it's going to be hard for them to change their thought process or what they think. You know, it's going to be very hard for them to change their thought process and what they think. And yeah, I don't, you know, maybe there were some things. I think when I brought up the whole name a game, he couldn't. All of a sudden, you know, he doesn't know gaming. There's no history. I could have sworn Nate's been playing games for a long time. All of a sudden, like, you know, all of a sudden I said, yo, name a game that's like a remake. This man brought the Zork. I can't. This man says Zork. I said before 2018, I said this man brought up the Zork. That's when I was like, I think I had enough. I said, I think I had enough of this. I think I've had enough of this, man. I think I've had enough of this. Zork. We're bringing up Zork. And zero, you can't name a single game. I mean, come on. No games were remakes beforehand. Your definition's flawed, plain and simple. Definition's flawed. Praise the Zork. Zork. Praise the Zork. I would call Xenoblade Remake what they did with Persona 5R. What they did with Persona 5R? No, Persona 5R isn't a remake. They just took the same game, literally the same source code, just took the same game and add some extra content to it. Xenoblade completely remade the models. What do you look at the thumbnail for this video? I mean, like, it's not the same. Okay, like it's not the same. Why are people blind? Honestly, like, is this blind? Am I missing something here? This is the game. I think this is the Wii, new Nintendo 3DS. This right here, this is the Wii. This is the new Nintendo 3DS. This one. So this is the Wii. This is the new Nintendo 3DS. This is a texture modded pack. So this is a remaster, okay, of the game where they take the game and they clean it up. They put it in 1080p HD. They put new textures and model it. Okay? And then this is Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. All right? Obviously, it's cropped, so it's reduced in quality. But see where there's grass? Where there was no grass? They're actually adding in extra things. They're remaking it. This used to be flat grass. Now there's actually flat grass, gang. Okay? Look at the model. It's a completely new model that's on here. Completely new, different. Am I missing something? Persona 5R looks the same. There's no drastic changes in it. It's just a resolution bump. This is actually adding in and different textures, different models. Persona 5R is not the same thing. It's not. So I don't get where this Persona 5R thing comes from. I really don't. Unless you're blind. I mean, if you think that that's the same thing, then okay, that's fine. But I don't see this. But hey. Many people need to see the eye doctor. They can't tell the difference. I don't know, man. The Dragonfly looks a little too similar. Remaster confirmed. Exactly. My personal beef of Nate Logic. He completely discredits art and graphics assets. Completely ignorant as 3D modeling is the main game source for remakes. Dude, I'm trying to tell you that. That's what I'm trying to say. Compare the Alvis pictures and look in the background. Alvis? What Alvis picture are you talking about? You can't call P5R a port. P5R is definitely it's a remaster. It's a higher quality remaster of the original game. They took the game and it's the same source code, so they ported the game. Obviously, it's a port. It's the same code, but they remastered it. They made it better. They did make it better, but it's like a higher quality HD remaster because the game on the PS4 Pro is higher quality in terms of like graphical update. Some things that they changed up, but the models are completely the same. It's enhanced, but the models are completely the same. So yeah. Are you replaying Xenoblade Chronicles? Are you gonna replay all Xenoblade Chronicles 1 before Future Connected? I'm gonna go Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and then I'm gonna get into Future Connected. I don't get how people can mix up remake and remaster. Well, it's based on definition. That's how they're mixing it up. Some people, like I said, I mean, like this guy that's on Twitter that's been arguing back and forth. He's saying that the only thing that's different is the art style. He's not saying that the models are different. It's just like they just changed the art. It's still the same model, but they just changed the art, which is ridiculous, So, so yeah. But hey, it is what it is. If you think Zork is the deal, so it is what it is. Oh, didn't even have to port it. Same console. They just sold the DLC as a new game. Yeah, it could have actually just been. It could have just been. Well, they could have did like a patch to update it and then put the extra content in there. That's true with the gameplay updates and stuff like that. It didn't need to be a whole new game, but they turned it into one. Like in order to get that stuff, you have to buy the game again, right? But it definitely could have been a patch where they update the graphics for it's a PS4 Pro patch, to be honest. The game, you got to take advantage of the better lookingness of the game, you got to have a PS4 Pro. So it's a PS4 Pro patch for the game, and it's added DLC content. They easily could have released a patch, and then, which we've seen PS4 Pro patches before, and then they could have just released the content as DLC, And then it wouldn't have been. But since they went the route of, you got to buy this game, and to get the upgrades, to get everything, then it turns into a remaster of the game. Since you got to package it, they forced it into a remaster, Is the art style in I already talked about that, man. Then what's the HD port? So why are you HD port? And a HD port is usually when they take a game Alright? And the game's not in HD, and they remaster it to be in HD. The thing is that we're already in the HD era. So if you take an HD game and you remaster it even more, then you just say it's a remaster. But an HD port is essentially a remaster. You take the game, you put it in HD, you plop it on the system, looks similar to whatever usually non-HD system it was, but it's still a remaster. We're in the HD era, so you're taking an HD game, all right, and you're remastering it again, and then you're releasing it. Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze. The only reason why we got the name HD port is because we didn't have HD before, but we're in the HD era, so we're re-releasing with better quality HD games. So therefore, it's just called a remaster. It's not called an HD remaster. It's already in HD, but in the previous iteration. They're just remastering it again. So the only reason the Nate splitting up HD port and remasters, that's ridiculous. The reason why we got HD ports are remasters. They are. It's just that we didn't have HD before. The 6th generation, there was no HD. Developers would take a lot of 6th generation games and make them into HD. They would port them to HD. Devil May Cry, right? We have dot hack games. A lot of PS2 games were HDified. Right? Here's the HD version of this game. It looks the same, but just it's sharper, smoother visuals. You know? That's the only difference. Now we're just taking the same game and making it better quality. Like I said, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Persona 5R, Royal, if you have a PS4 Pro. You know? So they're just remastering the game that's already remastered. Or already already HD. That's all they're doing. They're just taking a game that's already, there's no need to say HD port anymore because the games were already in HD that we're remaking because we've been in the HD era now for 2 generations. So if you're going to re-release a game that's already in HD, you're not going to call it an HD port. You're just going to call it a remaster like it's originally supposed to be. So that's, this, like I said, this revisionist, I'm going to make up my own definition for HD port is different from HD remaster. No, it's not. It's not. It's literally generally it's the same thing. It's just that one wasn't HD beforehand. Now the other one is. Sometimes too, like if you look at a remaster, you can see bigger differences. Sometimes, I guess, with some of them that were HD ports because the game wasn't in HD beforehand. But if you're looking at a lot of stuff, it looks very similar. Like a lot of the HD ports that we got, Shadow of the Colossus, for example, you know, which Nate was trying to say that's well, we don't know, even though everyone said it's a remake. Developers are lying, whatever. But the code, we don't know the code. If the code's the same, I can tell you, you don't know what the code is. That game's a remake. That game looks completely different, graphically, completely different. So yeah. Even journalist messes up with what's a remake or remaster, but Nate still said that's not how Remedia's thin of remakes. Yeah. You should have called in Jordan Fringe like MJ did Bill Murray in the Space Jam. I like Space Jam. Tim W says there's no way anyone should be on Nate's side on the Shadow of the Colossus is not a remake. Sony fans would really crush Nate's soul if he had if they had said that. Exactly. And that's why, I mean, I brought that up, man. This is ridiculous. The fact that we're trying to sit here, like I said, revisionist history and act like Shadow of the Colossus isn't a remake. We're calling it that. Stop. I mean, and that's not, but he said, well, it might be. He kind of flip-flopped. He said at first that it was a remaster, that it's not a remake, but then he said, oh, well, the code, maybe if it was. So he flip-flopped on it. But yeah, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I think a lot of us screw up the difference between remake and remaster. I know I consider certain things like Crash saying remake when many wouldn't. I consider it a remake too. I think we kind of screw up this stuff too, but I think it's, like I said, I think it's interesting to talk, and I'm glad that it was a so good to see you here, Dreamcast guy. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, but like what I was saying, like everybody called Shadow of the Colossus a remake, you know? Everybody said that Spyro was remade. You know, maybe some people said it was remastered, maybe, but everyone said that, yo, Spyro's completely being remade. Look at the graphics, they're way better. It was about graphics, you know? Crash Bandicoot, it was about the graphics. These games, Twin Snakes, it was about the graphics. The games were, I mean, yeah, there's some small gameplay tweaks here and there, but mainly they feel very similar to how they played before. And many of these games don't play drastically different. If you were good at Metal Gear Solid, Dreamcast guy, I think you know about this. If you were good at Metal Gear Solid on the PS1, you were probably good at Metal Gear Solid on the GameCube, Twin Snakes. If you were good at Spyro on the PS1, you're probably good at Spyro on that. It feels familiar. It feels very familiar to you. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that now all of a sudden, because I swear I could swear to you that nobody called Shadow of the Colossus based off of its gameplay, it being identical. And I love Shadow of the Colossus, by the way. I've beaten every single version of Shadow of the Colossus. I've beaten Shadow of the Colossus 1. I beat Ico. I beat Shadow of the Colossus on the PS2. I beat Shadow of the Colossus on the PS3. I beat Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4. They're short games. They don't take very long. You know, I beat all of them, and they're great. But I don't think anybody said at the time, yo, this game is a remaster of a remaster. Like, who said Shadow of the Colossus is a remaster of a remaster? Who said that? Did anybody say Shadow of the Colossus was a remaster of a HD port? Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4 was a remaster of a remaster? Did anybody say that? I don't recall people saying that. So now Nate's trying to say, well, it could be. And I'm like, nobody said that. You know? Now all of a sudden, in 2018, 2019 logic, now all of a sudden we're questioning whether Shadow of the Colossus is a remake or not, because it plays exactly the same as the previous game. You know, like, I mean, come on, man. I mean, come on. It's so Shadow of the Colossus is a remaster of a remaster? It's not a wait, what? That's what I said today. So it's a remaster of a remaster? No, it's not. It's a remake of the remaster. The PS3 version is an HD port / remaster. The PS3 version. The PS4 version is a remake of the remaster. Is a remake of that. It's just a remake of the original, or heck, it's a remake of the original game. They remade it. It looks so different. The models, the textures, there's just so much stuff. Yes, it's graphical and gameplay is the same, but it doesn't matter. Remakes come in different sizes and forms, you know? But it's all good. It's all good. I think we can all learn a thing or two from Dreamcast guy in terms of beating games. That's not good. We can't let Twitter public know about what they said. He's going to get harassed by Sony dudes. I mean, that's not something that I would say out publicly, because every single Sony dude that I knew, everybody that I knew said that Shadow of the Colossus was a remake. It wasn't even about Sony dudes. Nintendo dudes, Microsoft dudes, nobody questioned whether this game was a remake or not. Nobody did, based off of graphics alone. We're all like, yeah, the game plays exactly alike. It's smoother, 60 frames per second. Runs good. Go play Shadow. It's cheap, $20. Go play the game. I think you can even get it for 15 some places. It's great. I love Shadow of the Colossus. But nobody questioned it, despite it playing like I'm good at Shadow of the Colossus. You know why? Because I beat the game 10 times. You know? So when I picked up Shadow of the Colossus on the PS4, it was a breeze. You know, it was easy. Let's see. Sony dudes are busy freaking out about the Last of Us leaks. They don't have time to hate on Nate. Yeah, they don't. I don't think they care either. So is Star Ocean First Departure R situation? Star Ocean First Departure R is interesting because that is the Super Nintendo. That is a remaster. Originally, it was remastered from the Super Nintendo onto the PSP, and then that is a re-release of the PSP game, of a remake. So it is a remaster of a remake of the original game. The PSP game was remade, from what I understand with that, and then they remastered the remake. So there you go with that game, from what I understand. Now, of course, peering into code, I need to maybe look a little bit more into, but from what I understand, that is a remaster of the remake. So they're taking the game and they're making it in better resolution, and that's all they did to the game. They have some new art assets too that they did for the characters and stuff like that, but essentially it's the same game. So the game, your frontal lobe shouldn't hurt. The game was remade, right? It was remade on PSP, and then they took the game and they said, let's take that same PSP game, let's put it up to 1080p, and let's release it on Switch. That's what they did. So they remastered the remake. From what I understand. I would imagine remakes are much safer financially than new IP. Yeah, they could be, depending on how good the remake is, I guess. No matter what gamers want to call Xenoblade Chronicles, I'm buying it day one. Love the game. Haven't beaten it since the 3DS days. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. This remake and remaster stuff is so simple. I don't get why people can't figure it out. LOL. You got it down to simplify it for the audience. Yeah. This remake, let's see here. Tim W says it's possible to call Xenoblade Definitive Edition a remaster remake, hybrid term for the hybrid console. Yeah, that's what we should do. But anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. I appreciate you guys' support. I appreciate you guys coming out to the stream. Sorry about the whole Discord. This is how this thing looks. It's stupid, but I couldn't do anything about it. Got kicked. So we'll be back tomorrow. I'm gonna edit some videos. We'll be back tomorrow morning with some more content for you guys. So thank you guys so much for coming out. I do appreciate it, and we will see you guys. We will see you guys for the next one. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Thank you guys for the comments. Thank you guys for the donations. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you for the love. Shout out to Dreamcast Guy for stopping by. Shout out to everybody who stopped by Commonwealth Realm. I don't think he's still here. He's probably asleep. Shout out to Nate from the Nate Nintendo Prime. Shout out to him, man. Thank you for being a good sport. And thanks for all the discussion. Everybody who agreed, disagreed. It's a great discussion. All right, guys. We'll see you guys for the next one. Bye-bye.